Welcome, defender of the innocent, to a journey through the hallowed halls of justice where legends are forged in starlight and shadow. Tonight, we shall traverse the complete chronicles of Earth's greatest protectors, from their first tentative alliance to their cosmic battles that shaped the very fabric of reality itself. Let the steady rhythm of heroic hearts and the whisper of capes against wind carry you into peaceful slumber as we trace every triumph and tragedy that bound these titans together. Close your eyes, keeper of hope, and let these tales of unity and sacrifice unfold like the pages of destiny itself, written in courage and consecrated in eternal vigilance. In the beginning, before the great hall of justice echoed with the voices of united heroes, before the Watchtower cast its protective shadow across the earth, there existed scattered champions, walking solitary paths beneath the same distant stars. These were the first guardians, each carrying within their hearts the fundamental spark that would eventually ignite into something far greater than any individual flame could achieve alone. Their stories began not with grand proclamations or cosmic mandates, but with simple choices made in quiet moments when no one was watching, decisions that would ripple across time to touch the lives of billions yet unborn. The last son of Krypton had already established himself as a symbol of hope. His red cape, a banner of possibility streaming against the metropolis skyline. Clark Kent moved through his dual existence with the careful grace of one who understood that great power required not just great responsibility, but profound humility in the face of others' trust. His alien heritage remained a secret known only to those closest to him. Yet, his commitment to protecting humanity burned with the intensity of his homeworld's red sun, constant and unwavering, even as he grappled with questions of belonging that would never fully resolve. In Gotham City's perpetual twilight, another figure had emerged from personal tragedy to become something both more and less than human. Bruce Wayne's transformation into the Batman represented a different path to heroism, one forged in the crucible of loss and tempered by an obsession with justice that bordered on the pathological. Where Superman inspired through hope, Batman protected through fear, understanding that some forms of evil responded only to the language of terror spoken by those willing to descend into darkness while never allowing it to consume their essential humanity. From the hidden island of Themyscira came an Amazon princess whose mission bridged the ancient world with the modern, carrying within her soul the wisdom of goddesses and the compassion of mortals. Diana Prince walked among humanity as both warrior and diplomat, her very presence a reminder that truth and love were not weaknesses to be protected, but weapons to be wielded with skill and courage. Her lasso compelled honesty in a world built upon comfortable lies, while her shield deflected not only physical attacks, but the cynicism that threatened to corrode hope itself. In Central City, the fastest man alive raced against more than just crime and natural disasters, running an endless marathon against time itself, in pursuit of the scientific mysteries that governed his extraordinary abilities. Barry Allen's connection to the Speed Force made him both more grounded and more cosmic than his fellow heroes realized, his every stride carrying him through dimensions of possibility, while his forensic mind remained anchored in the methodical pursuit of truth through evidence and deduction. High above the Earth's surface, a member of an intergalactic police force patrolled his assigned sector with the dedication of one who understood that his oath encompassed not just his homeworld, but the vast network of civilizations scattered across the galaxies. Spiral arms. Hal Jordan's green ring responded to willpower itself, transforming his determination into constructs limited only by imagination and the strength of his commitment to protecting the innocent, whether they dwelt in familiar cities or on worlds whose names he could barely pronounce. Beneath the ocean's waves, Another guardian maintained his vigil over realms that surface dwellers rarely considered, ruling a kingdom that spanned the majority of Earth's surface, while serving as ambassador to a world that had never fully accepted his divided loyalties. Arthur Curry's burden was perhaps the most complex of all, for he stood as bridge between two peoples who viewed each other with suspicion and fear, his very existence proof that unity was possible, even across the vast differences that separated air-breathing and water-breathing civilizations. From the dying world of Mars came perhaps the most tragic figure of all, a being whose incredible powers were matched only by his profound loneliness, as the last survivor of a race that had achieved telepathic unity only to lose it all to forces beyond their control. John Johns, the Martian manhunter, brought to Earth not only his shape-shifting abilities and vast psychic powers, but also his understanding of what it meant to lose everything, while still finding reasons to protect and serve those who could never truly comprehend the depth of his sacrifice. These 7 champions operated in their separate spheres, each believing that their individual efforts were sufficient to address the challenges they encountered in their daily battles against crime, corruption, and the various forms of evil that plagued their respective territories. They had heard of each other, naturally, for their exploits had begun to attract attention from both the media and the criminal underworld. Yet none had seriously considered the possibility that their paths might converge in ways that would transform not only their own lives, but the entire nature of heroism itself. The world watched these solitary guardians with a mixture of awe and apprehension, uncertain whether the emergence of such powerful individuals represented evolution or aberration, salvation or potential catastrophe. Government agencies studied them from afar, seeking to understand their capabilities while preparing contingencies should any of them ever turn their abilities toward conquest rather than protection. Religious leaders debated whether their existence fulfilled ancient prophecies or challenged fundamental beliefs about humanity's place in the cosmic order. Scientists attempted to explain their powers through increasingly complex theories that strained the boundaries of established physics, while philosophers questioned what their presence meant for concepts of free will, destiny, and the relationship between power and moral authority. The common people, meanwhile, simply tried to adjust to living in a world where the impossible had become routine, where the morning news might include reports of alien invasions being thwarted by men who could fly, or criminal masterminds being defeated by individuals who could run faster than sound itself. Yet for all their individual achievements and growing reputations, none of these heroes had faced a challenge that exceeded their personal capabilities or required them to set aside their preferred methods of operation in favor of coordination and compromise. They remained magnificent in their isolation, each a complete solar system of purpose and dedication, orbiting their own particular mission without recognizing that they were part of a larger constellation whose pattern would only become apparent when external forces demanded that they look beyond their individual horizons. The catalyst for change came not from Earth itself, but from the vast emptiness between the stars, carried on the solar winds by an intelligence so alien that human language could barely encompass its nature or intentions. This was Starro the Conqueror, a being whose very existence challenged every assumption about life, consciousness, and the forms that intelligence could take when freed from the evolutionary pressures that had shaped terrestrial organisms over billions of years of gradual development. The creature that approached Earth resembled nothing so much as a massive starfish, its 5-pointed form pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that might have been beautiful under different circumstances. Yet beauty was irrelevant to Starro's purpose, for this was no mere animal acting on instinct, but a sophisticated conqueror whose method of domination was so insidious that entire civilizations had fallen to it without ever realizing they were under attack until their transformation was complete and irreversible. Starro's power lay not in brute force or advanced technology, but in its ability to reproduce itself through spores that attached themselves to the faces of sentient beings, creating smaller versions of itself that could override the host's consciousness while leaving their memories and skills intact. The conquered became willing servants who retained all their abilities while losing their capacity for independent thought, creating an army that grew stronger with each victory, while appearing to maintain the normal patterns of daily life. The first signs of Starro's presence manifested in coastal cities around the world, where reports began filtering in of strange behavior among marine biologists and oceanographers who had been conducting routine research in international waters. These individuals returned to their laboratories and institutions functioning normally in all apparent respects, yet colleagues noted subtle changes in their demeanor and priorities that suggested a shift in fundamental worldview that no one could adequately explain. Within days, the anomaly had spread to include government officials, military personnel, and influential citizens in major population centers, all of whom began advocating for policies and initiatives that seemed designed to concentrate population and resources in ways that served no obvious human purpose. The changes were gradual enough to avoid triggering widespread alarm, yet systematic enough to suggest coordination by some intelligence that understood both human psychology and organizational structures. Superman was among the first to recognize that something was seriously wrong, his enhanced senses detecting subtle changes in brainwave patterns among individuals he encountered during his routine patrols over Metropolis. The Kryptonian scientific training allowed him to identify the neurological signatures of external influence. Yet the scope of the phenomenon exceeded anything he had previously encountered, suggesting a threat that operated on scales beyond the reach of any single hero, no matter how powerful. In Gotham City, Batman's network of informants and electronic surveillance systems began reporting behavioral anomalies that followed patterns too complex and widespread to be explained by conventional criminal activity or psychological manipulation. The world's greatest detective's analytical mind recognized the hallmarks of systematic infiltration. Yet the methodology remained elusive, hidden behind apparent normalcy that made investigation extraordinarily difficult. Wonder Woman's diplomatic contacts within government and international organizations began exhibiting subtle shifts in their approach to global security matters, advocating for policies that would concentrate decision-making authority in ways that seemed designed to facilitate control by external forces. Her Amazon training in recognizing the influence of gods and magical entities suggested supernatural involvement, yet the phenomenon displayed technological sophistication that pointed toward alien rather than mystical origins. The Flash's connection to the Speed Force allowed him to perceive temporal distortions around affected individuals, as if their personal timelines had been subtly altered by influences operating outside normal causality. His scientific background in forensic analysis revealed evidence of biological contamination that seemed to originate from oceanic sources, yet the organism responsible remained frustratingly elusive. Despite his enhanced perceptions and investigative capabilities, Green Lantern's ring detected energy signatures consistent with advanced alien technology, yet the patterns were unlike anything in the core extensive database of known threats. The Guardians of the Universe had no record of similar incursions, suggesting either a previously unknown species or evolutionary development of familiar dangers into new forms that required entirely different approaches to containment and neutralization. Aquaman's telepathic connection to marine life revealed widespread distress among ocean-dwelling creatures, as if some alien presence were disrupting the natural psychic networks that had evolved over millions of years of aquatic evolution. The King of Atlantis recognized the signs of an invasion force using Earth's oceans as both base of operations and breeding ground for whatever assault they were preparing to launch against terrestrial civilization. The Martian Manhunter's shape-shifting abilities allowed him to infiltrate groups of affected individuals, where his telepathic powers detected the presence of alien thought patterns overlaying human consciousness like parasitic overlays. The technique was sophisticated beyond anything he had encountered during his law enforcement career on Mars, suggesting either advanced technology or evolutionary development that required immediate investigation and response. Each hero began investigating the phenomenon through their own methods and resources, yet the scope of the threat quickly became apparent as being beyond any individual's capacity to address effectively. The alien presence had already established itself so thoroughly within human society's power structures that conventional approaches to investigation and response were compromised before they could be implemented, requiring coordination between heroes who had never worked together and whose methods were often fundamentally incompatible. The moment of revelation came when Starro itself finally emerged from the depths of the Atlantic Ocean, its massive form rising from the waves, like some prehistoric deity returning to reclaim dominion over a world that had forgotten its ancient terrors. The creature's size dwarfed anything in Earth's recorded history, its tentacles stretching across miles of ocean surface, while its central consciousness pulsed with alien intelligence that had conquered dozens of worlds through methods too subtle for most civilizations to recognize until it was far too late. Superman arrived first, his incredible speed allowing him to respond within moments of the creature's emergence. Yet his initial assault revealed the inadequacy of brute force against an opponent whose defenses had been specifically designed to counter the kind of direct confrontation that had served him well against terrestrial threats. Starro's hide absorbed and redirected energy attacks, while its psychic emissions threatened to overwhelm even Kryptonian mental defenses that had been assumed to be absolute. Batman appeared next, arriving via aircraft whose stealth capabilities had allowed him to approach undetected while analyzing the creature's behavioral patterns and physiological structure through advanced scanning equipment. His tactical mind immediately recognized that conventional weapons would be ineffective against an organism of this size and apparent resilience, yet his detective skills detected vulnerabilities that might be exploited through indirect approaches requiring precise timing and coordination. Wonder Woman's arrival brought magical weapons and divine protection that proved more effective against Starro's psychic attacks, her lasso of truth compelling honesty, even from an alien intelligence whose thought processes operated according to principles entirely foreign to terrestrial psychology. Her warrior training provided insights into the creature's strategic thinking that complemented Batman's analytical approach while offering combat experience against opponents whose capabilities exceeded normal parameters. The Flash's speed allowed him to conduct reconnaissance missions around the creature's massive form while avoiding its defensive responses, gathering data about its structure and capabilities that would have been impossible to obtain through static observation. His scientific background provided crucial insights into the biological processes that maintained the creature's seemingly impossible size, while suggesting potential weak points that might be exploited through carefully coordinated attacks. Green Lantern's ring constructs proved capable of containing portions of Starro's mass, while his connection to the core provided access to databases of similar creatures encountered in other sectors of space. The Guardian's archives contained warnings about conquerors who used biological rather than technological means of domination, offering strategic guidance that proved invaluable in developing effective countermeasures against unprecedented threats. Aquaman's command of marine life allowed him to coordinate attacks by Earth's oceanic species, while his telepathic abilities provided crucial intelligence about Starro's communication methods and command structure. His understanding of aquatic ecosystems revealed how the creature had used Earth's oceans as breeding grounds for its spore-based offspring, while establishing the psychic networks necessary for coordinating its eventual assault on terrestrial civilization. The Martian Manhunter's telepathic powers allowed him to engage Starro on the psychic level, while his shape-shifting abilities enabled him to approach the creature without triggering its defensive responses. His experience with alien psychology provided insights into the creature's motivations and methods that proved essential in developing strategies for neutralizing its influence over already affected human populations while preventing further contamination. The battle that followed tested not only their individual capabilities, but their ability to coordinate strategies and tactics with allies, whose approaches to problem-solving were often fundamentally different from their own. Superman's tendency toward direct confrontation had to be balanced against Batman's preference for careful preparation and indirect approaches, while Wonder Woman's warrior instincts required integration with the Flash's scientific methodology and Green Lantern's military training. The turning point came when they realized that Starro's greatest strength, its ability to coordinate multiple consciousness into a unified intelligence, could also become its greatest weakness if they could overload its psychic processing capabilities through carefully orchestrated attacks that exceeded its ability to analyze and respond to simultaneously. This required precise timing and absolute trust between heroes who had never worked together before and whose individual methods were often incompatible with collaborative approaches. Superman provided the raw power necessary to breach Starro's physical defenses, while Batman coordinated the timing of attacks to maximize their effectiveness against the creature's vulnerable spots. Wonder Woman's magical weapons disrupted its psychic emanations, while the Flash created multiple attack vectors that exceeded its capacity to track and counter simultaneously. Green Lantern's constructs contained its attempts to escape, while Aquaman turned its oceanic allies against it, and the Martian Manhunter engaged its consciousness directly through telepathic combat. The victory, when it came, was absolute yet costly, requiring each hero to push beyond their established limits, while learning to trust allies whose methods and motivations they barely understood. Yet, in that moment of triumph, something far more significant than the defeat of a single enemy had been accomplished, for 7 individual champions had discovered that their combined capabilities exceeded the simple sum of their individual powers when properly coordinated and directed toward common purpose. As Starro's massive form sank beneath the Atlantic's waves and the psychic influence over affected human populations began to dissipate, the heroes found themselves gathered on the creature's makeshift island body, exhausted yet exhilarated by what they had accomplished together. The immediate threat had been neutralized, yet each recognized that they had participated in something that would change the nature of heroism itself, transforming it from individual endeavor into collaborative enterprise that could address challenges beyond any single person's capability. In the aftermath of their first great victory against the alien conqueror Starro, the 7 champions who would become Earth's greatest protectors discovered that their triumph had created as many questions as it had answered. The world had witnessed something unprecedented. Individual heroes setting aside their solitary methods to achieve what none could have accomplished alone. Yet this collaboration, however successful, had been born of desperate necessity rather than careful planning, and the challenges that followed would test whether their unity could survive the pressures of peace as effectively as it had served them in the crucible of cosmic war. The governments of the world watched these developments with particular interest, for the emergence of a coordinated superhuman response to global threats represented both an invaluable asset and a potential challenge to the established order that had governed international relations since the end of the Second World War. Military leaders and intelligence agencies began drafting reports that analyzed the implications of beings whose individual capabilities exceeded those of entire armies, while diplomatic corps struggled to determine how such entities should be integrated into existing frameworks of sovereignty and jurisdiction. The media, meanwhile, found itself grappling with the fundamental challenge of reporting on events that transcended the normal boundaries of journalism, requiring new vocabularies and conceptual frameworks to convey the reality of what had transpired. The battle against Starro had been witnessed by millions through satellite feeds and amateur recordings, yet the sheer scale of the confrontation defied conventional description, leaving reporters to resort to metaphors drawn from mythology and religion to convey the magnitude of what had occurred. Among the heroes themselves, the immediate euphoria of victory gradually gave way to more complex emotions as they began to process the implications of what they had accomplished together. Each had spent years developing individual approaches to crime fighting and heroism that reflected their unique backgrounds, capabilities, and moral philosophies. Yet their collaboration against Starro had required them to compromise and adapt in ways that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of their missions. Superman found himself reconsidering the limitations of his solitary approach to protecting humanity, recognizing that his individual efforts, however well-intentioned, could never address the full spectrum of threats that a hostile universe might direct toward Earth. His scientific training helped him understand that the principles governing effective teamwork were not fundamentally different from those that govern successful research collaborations, requiring clear communication, mutual respect, and willingness to acknowledge that others might possess insights and capabilities that complemented his own. Batman struggled with the implications of sharing information and coordinating strategies with individuals whose methods and motivations he had not yet fully analyzed and understood. His entire approach to crime fighting was built upon careful preparation, extensive research, and contingency planning that assumed complete control over operational variables. Yet effective collaboration required him to accept uncertainty and place trust in allies, whose decision-making processes he could not entirely predict or influence. Wonder Woman drew upon her diplomatic training to serve as mediator between personalities and approaches that often seemed fundamentally incompatible. Her experience in bridging different cultures and worldviews providing crucial skills for managing the interpersonal dynamics that threatened to undermine their newfound unity. Her warrior background had taught her the importance of unit cohesion in combat situations, yet she recognized that maintaining such cohesion during peacetime required different strategies and sustained commitment. The Flash brought his scientific perspective to bear on the challenge of analyzing their collaborative effectiveness, approaching the question of team dynamics with the same methodical rigor he applied to forensic investigations. His experience with laboratory research had familiarized him with the benefits of peer review and collaborative problem-solving, yet he understood that the stakes involved in superheroic teamwork were far higher than those typically encountered in academic or professional settings. Green Lantern's military background provided him with frameworks for understanding command structures and operational coordination, yet his experience with the Corps had been within a highly organized hierarchy with clear chains of command and established protocols. The challenge of working with independent operators who answered to no authority beyond their own moral convictions required adaptation of military principles to circumstances for which they had never been designed. Aquaman's role as both ruler and protector gave him unique insights into the challenges of balancing individual conscience with collective responsibility, understanding that effective leadership required not only personal integrity but also the ability to inspire others to subordinate their immediate preferences to larger purposes. His experience with Atlantean politics had taught him the importance of consensus building and diplomatic negotiation in maintaining unity among strong-willed individuals with competing priorities. The Martian Manhunter's telepathic abilities provided him with unprecedented access to the emotional and psychological dynamics that shaped their interactions. Yet his status as the sole survivor of his species made him particularly sensitive to the importance of preserving whatever connections he could forge with others who understood the burden of extraordinary responsibility. His law enforcement background had emphasized the importance of teamwork and mutual support, principles that translated readily to their current situation, despite the vast differences in scale and stakes. The first major test of their continued collaboration came from an unexpected source. Not a single overwhelming threat like Starro, but a coordinated assault by multiple alien entities known as the Appalaxians, each seeking to claim Earth as their new homeworld through contests of strength that would determine which species possessed the right to displace humanity entirely. This challenge was fundamentally different from their previous encounter, requiring them to divide their forces while maintaining coordination across vast distances and multiple simultaneous battlefronts. The Appalaxian invasion force consisted of 7 distinct entities, each representing a different evolutionary path and possessing unique capabilities that had been refined through eons of interstellar conquest. These were not mindless beasts or simple conquerors, but sophisticated intelligences whose strategic thinking had been honed through campaigns across dozens of worlds, each victory adding to their understanding of how to identify and exploit the weaknesses of potential prey species. The Wood King manifested as a massive plant-like entity whose tendrils could reshape entire landscapes, while its pollen carried spores capable of transforming animal life into extensions of its collective consciousness. Its assault on the Amazon rainforest threatened to convert Earth's primary oxygen-generating ecosystem into an alien biosphere that would gradually suffocate all non-compatible life forms while providing the foundation for a new planetary ecology under its control. The stone god took the form of an immense crystalline being whose mineral composition allowed it to interface with and control geological processes, triggering earthquakes and volcanic eruptions while converting Earth's rocky substrata into extensions of its crystalline matrix. Its emergence in the Himalayas began reshaping the planet's tectonic stability, threatening to trigger catastrophic changes in climate and geography that would make the world uninhabitable for existing life forms. The Metal Master appeared as a technological entity capable of controlling and transforming all artificial materials, turning humanity's industrial infrastructure against itself while building massive computational matrices from converted machinery. Its manifestation in major manufacturing centers began the systematic conversion of technological civilization into components of an alien intelligence that would eventually encompass all artificial constructs on the planet. The Fire Lord blazed across the sky as pure plasma given form and purpose, its passage igniting atmospheric gases while its presence raised global temperatures toward levels that would trigger catastrophic climate change. Its attacks on polar ice caps and oceanic thermal systems threatened to create a runaway greenhouse effect that would transform Earth into a world suitable only for energy-based life forms. The Glass King manifested as a creature of living sand, whose particles could infiltrate any environment while its crystalline structure allowed it to refract and redirect various forms of energy. Its emergence in desert regions began the systematic conversion of silicon-based materials into components of vast glass structures that would serve as focusing arrays for solar energy collection and redistribution. The Mercury Monster took the form of a liquid metal entity whose shape-shifting capabilities allowed it to infiltrate and corrupt biological systems, while its toxic properties threatened all carbon-based life. Its attacks on water supplies and agricultural systems began the systematic poisoning of Earth's biosphere, preparing the way for life forms that could thrive in environments lethal to existing species. The crystal creature emerged as a being of living mineral, whose faceted form could split and multiply, while maintaining collective consciousness across all its fragments. Its ability to create identical copies of itself from available materials threatened to overwhelm Earth through sheer numerical superiority, each duplicate possessing the full capabilities and memories of the original. The simultaneous emergence of these 7 entities across different continents presented the newly formed alliance of heroes with their first true test of collaborative strategy and tactical coordination. Unlike their battle against Starro, which had allowed them to concentrate their efforts against a single opponent, this crisis required them to divide their forces while maintaining communication and mutual support across vast distances and multiple theaters of operation. Superman found himself confronting the Fire Lord above the Arctic Ocean, his invulnerability protecting him from the creature's plasma attacks, while his freeze breath provided a natural counter to its ability to ignite atmospheric gases. Yet the scale of the entity's power threatened to overwhelm even Kryptonian capabilities, requiring him to develop new applications of his abilities while coordinating with allies who could provide strategic support from their own battlefields. Batman engaged the Metal Master in the industrial districts of Gotham City, his technological expertise and strategic planning providing crucial advantages against an opponent whose control over machinery might have overwhelmed less prepared adversaries. His network of hidden equipment caches and backup systems allowed him to maintain operational effectiveness even as the creature converted most technological resources to its own purposes, while his analytical mind worked to identify patterns in its behavior that could be exploited through careful timing and misdirection. Wonder Woman faced the stone god in the mountains of her Mediterranean homeland, her magical weapons proving effective against an opponent whose mineral composition rendered it resistant to conventional attacks. Her divine heritage provided her with insights into the creature's elemental nature, while her warrior training allowed her to adapt ancient combat techniques to the unprecedented challenge of fighting an opponent whose size and durability exceeded anything in mythological record. The Flash confronted the Mercury monster in Central City, his speed allowing him to avoid the creature's toxic attacks, while his scientific background provided crucial insights into its biochemical properties and vulnerabilities. His ability to vibrate his molecular structure enabled him to phase through the creature's liquid form without being contaminated, while his forensic training helped him analyze its behavioral patterns and predict its tactical responses. Green Lantern battled the crystal creature in space above Earth's surface, his ring constructs, proving capable of containing the entity's attempts to multiply and spread, while his connection to the core provided access to advanced scanning technologies that revealed its structural weaknesses. His military training allowed him to coordinate orbital bombardment strategies that prevented the creature from establishing footholds on the planet's surface while protecting civilian populations from collateral damage. Aquaman engaged the Wood King in the depths of the Atlantic Ocean, his telepathic connection to marine life, providing him with allies capable of resisting the creature's biological contamination, while his understanding of oceanic ecosystems helped him predict and counter its attempts to establish underwater root systems. His command of the seas allowed him to redirect ocean currents and underwater volcanic activity against the creature's expanded root network. The Martian Manhunter confronted the Glass King in the Sahara Desert, his shape-shifting abilities, allowing him to adapt to the creature's constantly changing tactics, while his telepathic powers provided insights into its alien thought processes and strategic planning. His experience with desert environments and mineral-based life forms helped him understand the creature's vulnerabilities to specific types of energy, manipulation, and structural disruption. The challenge facing each hero was not merely defeating their assigned opponent, but maintaining communication and coordination with allies fighting similar battles thousands of miles away. The Appalaxians had clearly planned their assault to exploit the limitations of human communication technology and the difficulties of coordinating responses across multiple time zones and geographic regions. Yet, the heroes' diverse capabilities provided them with alternative methods of maintaining contact and mutual support. Superman's enhanced hearing allowed him to detect and relay information about his allies' situations, while his speed enabled him to provide direct assistance when critical moments arose in other theaters of operation. His scientific training helped him analyze the relationships between different Appalaxian entities and identify potential vulnerabilities that could be exploited through coordinated attacks across multiple battlefields. Batman's global communications network and strategic planning capabilities provided the foundation for coordinated tactical responses, his analytical mind working constantly to identify patterns in the enemy's behavior and predict their likely responses to various countermeasures. His contingency planning helped ensure that each hero had backup support and alternative strategies available when their primary approaches proved insufficient. Wonder Woman's diplomatic experience proved crucial in maintaining morale and unity among allies who were being tested to their absolute limits while facing opponents whose capabilities seemed to exceed anything they had previously encountered. Her inspirational presence and unwavering commitment to protecting innocent life helped sustain their collective resolve during the darkest moments of the prolonged conflict. The Flash's speed allowed him to serve as a rapid response messenger and emergency backup, his ability to traverse continents in seconds, enabling him to provide critical assistance to allies whose situations became desperate while maintaining his own engagement against his assigned opponent. His scientific background helped him identify connections between different Appalaxian entities that suggested coordinated behavioral patterns and shared vulnerabilities. Green Lantern's ring provided long-range communication capabilities and orbital reconnaissance that proved invaluable for maintaining situational awareness across all theaters of operation, while coordinating strategic responses that took advantage of the enemy's tactical mistakes. His military training helped him develop and implement operational plans that maximized their collective effectiveness while minimizing risks to civilian populations. Aquaman's command of oceanic currents and weather patterns allowed him to influence environmental conditions across multiple battlefields, creating tactical advantages for his allies, while disrupting the enemy's strategic planning through unexpected changes in geographic and meteorological factors. His understanding of global ecosystems helped him predict and counter the long-term consequences of the Appalaxians' environmental modifications. The Martian Manhunter's telepathic abilities enabled him to maintain direct mental contact with allies whose communication equipment had been compromised or destroyed, while his shape-shifting capabilities allowed him to impersonate defeated enemies and gather intelligence about their remaining strategic capabilities and planned responses. The turning point in the battle came when the heroes realized that the 7 Appalaxian entities were not truly independent operators, but components of a larger collective intelligence that shared information and coordinated strategies across all theaters of operation. This discovery suggested that defeating individual entities would be insufficient as long as the collective consciousness remained intact, requiring a coordinated assault that could disrupt their shared communication network, while simultaneously overwhelming their defensive capabilities. The solution emerged from combining Batman's strategic analysis with the Martian Manhunter's telepathic insights and Green Lantern's understanding of advanced alien technology. The Appalaxians' collective consciousness operated through quantum entanglement protocols that maintained instantaneous communication across interstellar distances. Yet this same network could be overloaded and disrupted if subjected to precisely calibrated feedback loops that exceeded its processing capabilities. The implementation of this strategy required unprecedented coordination between all 7 heroes, each timing their attacks to create specific resonance patterns that would interact with the enemy's quantum communication system. Superman's heat vision provided the initial frequency burst, while Batman's technological expertise guided the precise modulation required to create cascading feedback effects. Wonder Woman's magical weapons disrupted the entity's ability to maintain coherent thought patterns, while the Flash's vibrational capabilities created interference waves that prevented them from adapting to the assault. Green Lantern's constructs contained the resulting energy releases, while Aquaman used his environmental controls to channel the destructive forces away from populated areas. The Martian Manhunter's telepathic powers allowed him to monitor the collective consciousness as it began to collapse, providing real-time feedback that enabled the other heroes to adjust their attacks for maximum effectiveness. His insights into alien psychology proved crucial for understanding how to target the specific cognitive processes that maintained the entity's coordination and collective identity. The victory that followed was both complete and illuminating, for it demonstrated that their collaborative capabilities had evolved far beyond what any of them had imagined possible during their first uncertain alliance against Starro. They had learned to function as a true team, their individual strengths combining and amplifying each other in ways that created capabilities that exceeded the simple sum of their parts. Yet this triumph also revealed the depths of their ignorance about the threats that awaited them in a universe populated by intelligences whose capabilities and motivations remained largely incomprehensible to terrestrial minds. The Appalaxians had been merely scouts for larger forces whose existence suggested that Earth's emergence as a planet protected by superhumans had attracted attention from entities whose power and sophistication dwarfed anything they had yet encountered. As the 7 entities collapsed into inert matter and their environmental modifications began to reverse themselves, the heroes found themselves confronted with the recognition that their victory had been achieved through methods and strategies that none of them could have developed alone. Their collaboration had evolved from desperate improvisation into sophisticated teamwork that represented a new form of heroism entirely, one that would be essential for facing the challenges that lay ahead. The immediate aftermath of their victory brought new complications, as governments and media organizations struggled to understand and respond to the implications of coordinated superhuman intervention in global crises. The heroes themselves faced difficult questions about accountability, jurisdiction, and the appropriate limits of their authority to act unilaterally in situations that affected entire nations and potentially the entire planet. Superman's moral philosophy emphasized the importance of serving rather than ruling humanity, yet his involvement in global-scale conflicts inevitably raised questions about the degree to which his personal judgment should influence decisions that affected billions of people who had no voice in his choices. His commitment to transparency and accountability would require him to engage with political and social institutions in ways that his previous career had not demanded. Batman's preference for operating in shadows and maintaining complete control over information would need to be balanced against the collaborative requirements of team membership and the public's legitimate interest in understanding the capabilities and intentions of beings whose power exceeded that of any earthly institution. His detective instincts warned him that their growing visibility would attract attention from enemies whose sophistication matched their own. Wonder Woman's diplomatic background provided her with frameworks for navigating these complex political and social challenges, yet her status as representative of a hidden civilization raised questions about international law and sovereignty that had no precedent in human history. Her commitment to truth and justice would require her to help develop new institutions and agreements that could accommodate the reality of superhuman intervention in global affairs. The Flash's scientific training led him to approach these questions with methodical analysis and experimental thinking, recognizing that they were essentially pioneering new forms of social organization and international cooperation without established precedents to guide their efforts. His commitment to protecting innocent life would require him to help develop protocols and procedures that could minimize collateral damage while maximizing their effectiveness against increasingly sophisticated threats. Green Lantern's military experience and connection to an intergalactic police force provided him with models for organized superhuman intervention. Yet, the unique circumstances of Earth's situation required adaptation of these models to accommodate democratic principles and individual rights that were not universal constants throughout the galaxy. His oath to the core would need to be balanced against his growing commitment to his human allies and adopted homeworld. Aquaman's experience as both ruler and protector gave him unique insights into the challenges of exercising power responsibly while maintaining legitimacy and public support. Yet his dual loyalty to surface and oceanic civilizations created complications that would only intensify as their activities attracted more public attention. His understanding of environmental systems would prove crucial as their enemies began targeting Earth's ecological foundations. The Martian Manhunter's status as refugee and adopted citizen provided him with perspectives on belonging and responsibility that complemented his allies' approaches, while highlighting the unique challenges faced by beings whose extraordinary nature separated them from the societies they had sworn to protect. His telepathic abilities would prove invaluable for maintaining team cohesion as external pressures threatened to divide them. The formation of their first organized opposition came not from alien invaders or cosmic entities, but from terrestrial criminals whose traditional methods had been disrupted by the emergence of coordinated superhuman law enforcement. These individuals possessed the intelligence and resources necessary to analyze the heroes' methods and develop countermeasures, yet their criminal backgrounds provided them with insights into human weakness and corruption that could be weaponized against opponents whose moral principles created predictable vulnerabilities. The secret society of supervillains emerged from the shadows of organized crime and international terrorism as a direct response to the heroes' growing effectiveness against conventional threats. These were not random criminals or mad scientists, but sophisticated opponents whose capabilities had been specifically developed to counter the unique strengths of individual heroes while exploiting the organizational challenges inherent in any collaborative enterprise. Lex Luthor emerged as the criminal mastermind, whose intellectual capabilities rivaled those of any hero, while his complete lack of moral restraint allowed him to pursue strategies and tactics that honorable opponents would never consider. His obsession with Superman provided him with detailed knowledge of Kryptonian capabilities and psychology, yet his scientific genius and vast resources made him a threat to all heroes whose activities interfered with his ambitions for wealth and power. The relationship between heroism and its opposition was revealed to be far more complex than simple moral dualism, for the emergence of organized supercrime was itself a consequence of the heroes' success against conventional threats. Their effectiveness had created evolutionary pressure that favored criminal enterprises capable of adapting to superhuman law enforcement, resulting in adversaries whose sophistication and coordination matched their own. This revelation forced each hero to confront uncomfortable truths about the long-term consequences of their actions and the degree to which their very success in protecting society had contributed to the emergence of threats that exceeded anything that had existed before their intervention. The battle against the secret society would test not only their tactical capabilities, but their understanding of justice, responsibility, and the complex relationships between order and chaos that governed civilized society. The psychological warfare that accompanied these conflicts proved as challenging as any physical confrontation, for their enemies understood that heroes whose strength derived from moral conviction could be defeated through corruption of the principles that motivated their actions. Each hero faced opponents specifically chosen and prepared to exploit their individual psychological vulnerabilities, while undermining their confidence in the collaborative relationships that had become essential to their effectiveness. Superman confronted enemies who challenged his faith in humanity's essential goodness, while forcing him to question whether his protection of Earth actually weakened humanity by preventing them from developing their own solutions to the challenges that threatened their survival. Lex Luthor's arguments contained enough truth to create genuine doubt about whether alien intervention in human affairs was ultimately beneficial, or merely another form of colonialism disguised as benevolence. Batman faced opponents whose methodical approach to crime mirrored his own detective techniques, while their willingness to sacrifice innocent lives for tactical advantage forced him to question whether his refusal to use lethal force represented moral strength or dangerous weakness. The challenge of maintaining his principles while protecting allies who might not survive encounters with enemies who recognized no moral limitations tested his commitment to collaborative heroism. Wonder Woman encountered adversaries who exploited the tensions between her warrior training and her diplomatic mission, creating situations where violence seemed the only solution to protect innocent life, while recognizing that such solutions contradicted her role as ambassador and peacemaker. The challenge of balancing competing obligations while maintaining team unity required constant navigation of complex moral and political terrain. The Flash discovered that his scientific approach to heroism could be turned against him by enemies who understood the methodical nature of his investigative techniques while possessing the patience and resources necessary to exploit his predictable behavioral patterns. The realization that his commitment to evidence-based decision-making could become a liability in conflicts with opponents who operated according to entirely different principles forced him to develop new approaches to crime fighting. Green Lantern's military background provided him with frameworks for understanding organized opposition, yet his enemies' complete disregard for rules of engagement and civilian safety created tactical situations for which no military training could have prepared him. The challenge of maintaining professional standards while engaging opponents who recognized no limitations on their methods tested his ability to adapt core protocols to unprecedented circumstances. Aquaman's dual loyalty to surface and oceanic civilizations was exploited by enemies who created conflicts between these competing obligations while threatening both communities simultaneously. His effectiveness as both ruler and protector was challenged by situations that required him to choose between protecting his subjects and supporting his allies, decisions that could have long-term consequences for global stability. The Martian Manhunter's telepathic abilities became liabilities when confronted by enemies who understood how to create psychic interference and false mental impressions that could compromise his perceptions while endangering his allies. His emotional vulnerability as the last survivor of his species was weaponized by opponents who threatened to destroy the connections he had formed with his adopted homeworld and chosen family. The resolution of this conflict required each hero to confront and overcome their individual psychological vulnerabilities while learning to trust their allies completely despite the manipulations and deceptions their enemies had used to undermine team cohesion. The victory that followed was psychological as much as tactical, representing their evolution from individual champions into a unified force capable of withstanding any assault on their principles or their unity. Yet even as they celebrated this triumph, each hero understood that they had faced merely the first organized response to their emergence as a coordinated force for justice and protection. The universe was vast and filled with intelligences whose motivations and capabilities remained unknown, while Earth itself harbored threats that had not yet revealed themselves, but whose emergence was inevitable given the attention their activities had attracted. The lessons learned from these early trials would prove invaluable in the greater challenges that awaited them, for they had discovered that true strength lay not in individual capability, but in the trust and coordination that bound them together in service of principles larger than any personal ambition or desire. Their unity had been forged in the crucible of conflict and tested by enemies who understood their individual weaknesses, yet it had emerged stronger and more resilient than any of them had dared hope possible. The triumph over the secret society of supervillains had demonstrated that Earth's defenders could overcome even the most sophisticated terrestrial opposition through unity, strategic thinking, and unwavering commitment to their shared principles. Yet, as the echoes of that victory faded and the heroes returned to their individual territories and responsibilities, each began to sense that their growing reputation had attracted attention from forces that operated on scales far beyond anything they had previously imagined. The universe itself was beginning to take notice of the small blue planet whose champions had proven capable of defeating threats that should have overwhelmed any single world's defensive capabilities. The first intimations of this cosmic awareness came through seemingly unrelated incidents scattered across the globe, phenomena that might have been dismissed as natural anomalies or technological malfunctions had they not been investigated by minds trained to recognize patterns that transcended conventional understanding. Strange energy readings appeared at observatories worldwide, signatures that suggested the presence of technologies operating according to principles that challenged fundamental assumptions about physics and the nature of space itself. Green Lantern Hal Jordan was among the first to recognize the significance of these developments, his ring's connection to the Guardians of the Universe providing him with access to databases that catalog threats and phenomena across thousands of sectors of space. The energy patterns detected by Earth's instruments matched profiles associated with interstellar conflicts of unprecedented scope and intensity, suggesting that events occurring light years away were beginning to have measurable effects on the fabric of reality itself. The revelation that would transform their understanding of their place in the cosmic order came through the arrival of two beings whose very existence challenged every assumption about the relationship between mythology and science, between ancient legends and contemporary reality. Katar-Hol and Shayera Thal descended from the heavens in a craft whose design incorporated principles that terrestrial aeronautics had never conceived, their appearance marking Earth's first contact with a civilization that had achieved technological advancement through paths entirely different from human development. These visitors from the planet Thanagar brought with them not only advanced technology and scientific knowledge, but also a complex political and military situation that threatened to engulf Earth in conflicts that predated human civilization by millions of years. Their pursuit of criminals who had escaped Thanagarian justice had led them across the galaxy to a world whose primitive inhabitants seemed incapable of protecting themselves against adversaries whose capabilities exceeded anything in terrestrial experience. Yet the Thanagarians' initial assessment of Earth's defensive capabilities proved to be catastrophically wrong, for they had not anticipated the emergence of indigenous champions, whose powers and coordination had already proven effective against threats that sophisticated galactic civilizations might have struggled to contain. The cultural misunderstandings that followed nearly precipitated the very disaster they had sought to prevent, as superior technology and ancient prejudices collided with principles and capabilities that neither side fully understood. Hawkman and Hawkwoman, as they chose to be known to their adopted world, brought with them knowledge of advanced materials and energy sources that could revolutionize human technology, while also introducing concepts of justice and law enforcement that operated according to principles foreign to terrestrial jurisprudence. Their nth metal wings and energy weapons represented the culmination of scientific development that had proceeded along entirely different lines from Earth's technological evolution, yet their effectiveness depended upon philosophical assumptions about authority and responsibility that created immediate friction with established heroes. The complexity of their situation was compounded by the gradual revelation that their connection to Earth was far more ancient and mysterious than their initial explanations had suggested. Archaeological evidence began to emerge, suggesting that beings matching their description had visited Earth in the distant past, leaving behind artifacts and legends that had influenced human development in ways that neither species fully understood. The possibility that their arrival represented not first contact, but rather the renewal of connections that had been severed by cosmic catastrophes, added layers of complexity to an already difficult diplomatic situation. Superman's scientific background and moral philosophy led him to approach the Thanagarians with cautious optimism, recognizing that their advanced knowledge could benefit humanity while remaining alert to the potential dangers of cultural contamination and technological dependence. His own alien heritage provided him with insights into the challenges faced by beings trying to find their place in societies that had not evolved to accommodate their unique capabilities and perspectives. Batman's detective instincts immediately focused on the inconsistencies in the Thanagarians' explanations and the potential security threats posed by individuals whose true capabilities and motivations remained largely unknown. His strategic mind began developing contingency plans for various scenarios, while his investigative skills worked to uncover the complete truth about their visitors' backgrounds and ultimate intentions. Wonder Woman's diplomatic experience proved invaluable in navigating the cultural differences that separated Thanagarian and human approaches to justice and authority, her understanding of warrior cultures providing crucial insights into their psychology, while her commitment to truth helped identify common ground that could serve as the foundation for productive cooperation. The Flash's scientific curiosity was immediately engaged by the Thanagarians' technology and its implications for human understanding of physics and engineering, yet his forensic training made him skeptical of explanations that seemed designed to conceal as much as they revealed. His ability to conduct research at superhuman speed allowed him to compile extensive data about their visitors while analyzing inconsistencies that might indicate deception or incomplete disclosure. Aquaman's experience with cultural conflicts between surface and oceanic civilizations provided him with frameworks for understanding the challenges faced by beings caught between different worlds and competing loyalties. Yet his telepathic abilities detected undercurrents of emotion and motivation that suggested their situation was far more complex than they had initially indicated. The Martian Manhunter's status as refugee and adopted citizen of Earth gave him unique empathy for the Thanagarian situation, while his telepathic powers provided insights into their psychological states that revealed the depth of their internal conflicts. His law enforcement background helped him understand their commitment to pursuing justice across interstellar distances, while recognizing the potential dangers of allowing such pursuits to occur without proper oversight or accountability. The investigation that followed revealed layer upon layer of deception and half-truth, not motivated by malicious intent but by the complex web of obligations, fears, and ancient grievances that had shaped Thanagarian civilization for millennia. The criminals they pursued were indeed dangerous, yet the methods employed in their apprehension had implications for Earth's sovereignty and security that could not be ignored by responsible protectors. The truth, when it finally emerged, was both more complex and more dangerous than any of the heroes had anticipated. The Thanagarian Empire was not the benevolent civilization their initial representatives had suggested, but rather a militaristic society whose expansion across the galaxy had been achieved through conquest and subjugation of less technologically advanced worlds. Their interest in Earth was not purely altruistic, but reflected strategic considerations that viewed the planet as a potential military asset in conflicts that could engulf entire sectors of space. The revelation that Hawkman and Hawkwoman had been sent not as refugees or justice seekers, but as advanced scouts preparing for eventual invasion, forced the heroes to confront their first major test of unity in the face of betrayal by individuals they had begun to consider allies and friends. The personal relationships that had developed between the team members and their Thanagarian guests became weapons that could be used to exploit their emotional vulnerabilities and divide their loyalties. Yet the situation was further complicated by the genuine affection and respect that had developed between the visitors and their hosts, emotions that transcended political and strategic considerations while creating conflicts between duty and conscience that neither side had anticipated. Hawkman and Hawkwoman found themselves caught between loyalty to their homeworld and growing attachment to Earth and its people, forced to choose between following orders and following their hearts. The military conflict that followed tested every aspect of the heroes' collaborative capabilities while introducing them to forms of warfare that operated on scales and according to principles entirely different from anything they had previously encountered. Thanagarian strategy relied upon superior technology and centuries of experience in interstellar conquest, yet their tactics had been developed for use against civilizations that lacked organized superhuman defenders. The invasion fleet that emerged from hyperspace represented the culmination of military science that had been refined through countless campaigns against worlds whose inhabitants had never dreamed of threats descending from the stars. Thanagarian warships incorporated technologies that could manipulate gravity, energy, and matter itself, while their weapons systems had been designed to overwhelm planetary defenses through applications of force that exceeded anything in terrestrial experience. Yet the invaders had not anticipated the unique combination of individual capability and collective coordination that Earth's defenders had developed through their previous battles against cosmic threats. Their military doctrine assumed that primitive worlds would collapse under the initial assault, leaving only scattered resistance that could be systematically eliminated through superior firepower and tactical mobility. Superman's confrontation with the Thanagarian fleet in Earth's upper atmosphere demonstrated the limitations of conventional military thinking when applied to opponents whose capabilities transcended normal parameters. His speed and invulnerability allowed him to engage multiple warships simultaneously, while his scientific understanding helped him identify weaknesses in their defensive systems that could be exploited through precisely targeted attacks. Batman's strategic analysis of Thanagarian tactics revealed patterns and assumptions that could be turned against them through careful misdirection and exploitation of their cultural blind spots. His understanding of psychology and military doctrine allowed him to predict their responses to various scenarios while developing countermeasures that took advantage of their unfamiliarity with Earth's unique defensive capabilities. Wonder Woman's combat experience against mythological beings, whose power exceeded normal human understanding, provided her with tactical insights that proved crucial for engaging opponents whose technology seemed almost magical in its capabilities. Her warrior training allowed her to adapt ancient combat principles to the unprecedented challenges of interstellar warfare, while maintaining the moral clarity necessary for making difficult decisions under extreme pressure. The Flash's speed allowed him to conduct reconnaissance missions throughout the battle zone, while providing rapid response support to allies whose situations became critical during the prolonged engagement. His scientific background helped him analyze Thanagarian technology during combat, identifying vulnerabilities and capabilities that proved essential for developing effective countermeasures. Green Lantern's connection to the Corps provided him with tactical intelligence about Thanagarian military capabilities, while his ring constructs proved effective against their advanced weaponry. His military experience helped him coordinate defensive strategies that took advantage of Earth's defenders' unique strengths, while minimizing their exposure to enemy capabilities designed to overwhelm conventional opposition. Aquaman's command of Earth's oceanic systems allowed him to deny the invaders access to 3/4 of the planet's surface, while coordinating environmental responses that disrupted their tactical planning. His telepathic abilities proved effective for maintaining communication and coordination despite Thanagarian attempts to jam conventional communication systems. The Martian Manhunter's shape-shifting capabilities allowed him to infiltrate Thanagarian positions while gathering intelligence about their strategic planning and psychological state. His telepathic powers proved partially effective against alien minds, providing crucial insights into their motivations and tactical thinking that helped his allies anticipate and counter their strategic responses. The turning point in the conflict came not through superior force or tactical brilliance, but through the moral courage of individuals who chose principles over loyalty, conscience over convenience. Hawkman and Hawkwoman's decision to stand with Earth against their own people represented a form of heroism that transcended simple battlefield valor, requiring them to sacrifice everything they had known in service of what they had come to believe was right. Their intimate knowledge of Thanagarian technology and tactical doctrine proved invaluable for developing countermeasures that could neutralize the invaders' technological advantages, while their understanding of Thanagarian psychology helped identify negotiating positions that might lead to peaceful resolution rather than mutual destruction. Yet their betrayal of their homeworld came at enormous personal cost, making them exiles from the civilization that had shaped their identities while forcing them to rebuild their lives around entirely new principles and relationships. The resolution of the conflict established important precedents for Earth's relationship with interstellar civilizations, while demonstrating that the planet's defenders were capable of protecting their world against threats whose scope exceeded anything previously encountered. Yet victory came with the recognition that Earth's emergence as a defended world had attracted attention from forces that operated on truly cosmic scales, entities whose power and motivations made even advanced civilizations like Thanagar seem primitive by comparison. The discovery of parallel dimensions and alternate realities began during routine scientific investigations that revealed anomalous readings in quantum mechanics experiments being conducted in laboratories around the world. The mathematical models that described these phenomena suggested the existence of alternate versions of reality, where familiar laws of physics operated according to slightly different parameters, creating worlds that were similar to yet fundamentally different from the reality that the heroes knew and protected. The first concrete evidence of parallel worlds came through the unexpected arrival of individuals who appeared to be identical to known heroes, yet whose behavior and moral orientation represented complete inversions of everything their Pates counterparts stood for. These beings claim to originate from a reality designated Earth 3, where the roles of heroes and villains had been reversed through evolutionary processes that had favored different survival strategies and social values. The Crime Syndicate of America, as these dark reflections called themselves, represented everything that the heroes might have become had their extraordinary abilities been guided by selfishness, cruelty, and the desire for power rather than service, protection, and the pursuit of justice. Their leader, Ultraman, possessed capabilities similar to Superman's, yet used them to dominate rather than inspire, ruling through fear and intimidation, while demonstrating the corrupting influence of power exercised without moral restraint. Owlman's twisted intellect mirrored Batman's analytical capabilities while lacking any trace of the compassion and commitment to justice that motivated the Dark Knight's crusade against crime. His strategic planning and technological resources were directed toward increasing his own power and influence while eliminating anyone who might challenge his authority or interfere with his schemes. Superwoman's strength and warrior training echoed Wonder Woman's capabilities, yet were employed in service of conquest and domination rather than protection and diplomacy. Her Amazon heritage had been corrupted by philosophies that emphasized strength through cruelty rather than strength through service, creating a being whose power was matched only by her capacity for calculated evil. The psychological impact of encountering these dark reflections proved as challenging as the physical threat they represented, for each hero was forced to confront the possibility that their own moral choices were not inevitable consequences of their powers, but rather decisions that could have gone differently under altered circumstances. The existence of beings who shared their capabilities yet had chosen entirely different paths raised uncomfortable questions about the nature of heroism and the factors that determined whether extraordinary power would be used for good or evil. Superman's confrontation with Ultraman became a philosophical debate as much as a physical battle, each seeking to prove that their approach to using Kryptonian abilities represented the superior path. Ultraman's arguments about the weakness of mercy and the foolishness of self-sacrifice contained enough logical consistency to create genuine doubt about whether Superman's moral principles were truly optimal for protecting those he claimed to serve. Batman found himself engaged in a strategic contest with Owlman, whose outcome would determine not merely victory or defeat, but the validation of fundamentally different approaches to using superior intellect and resources. Owlman's willingness to sacrifice innocent lives for tactical advantage forced Batman to question whether his own moral limitations represented strength or a dangerous handicap that could cost the lives of those depending on his protection. Wonder Woman's battle with Superwoman became a test of competing philosophies about the proper use of warrior training and divine gifts, each seeking to demonstrate that their understanding of strength and justice represented the more effective path. Superwoman's cynicism about human nature and the futility of trying to inspire rather than control challenged Wonder Woman's fundamental beliefs about the potential for growth and redemption. The resolution of this crisis required each hero to reaffirm their commitment to their moral principles, not through logical argument, but through demonstrated effectiveness, proving that their approach to heroism produced better outcomes for the people they sought to protect. Yet the encounter with their dark reflections left lasting psychological scars, constant reminders of the paths they had rejected, and the vigilance required to ensure that power remained servant rather than master. The implications of parallel world contact extended far beyond the immediate threat posed by the crime syndicate, for the existence of multiple realities suggested that the universe was far more complex and dangerous than anyone had previously imagined. If alternate versions of reality could be accessed through advanced technology or cosmic accidents, then the potential for contamination, invasion, or simple misunderstanding between different dimensional frameworks created challenges that transcended anything they had yet encountered. The scientific community's response to evidence of parallel dimensions revolutionized physics and philosophy, while creating new categories of potential threats that required unprecedented forms of preparation and response. The heroes found themselves serving not merely as protectors of their own world, but as guardians of dimensional stability itself, responsible for preventing conflicts between realities that could have consequences extending far beyond any single world or timeline. Green Lantern's ring began detecting energy signatures associated with dimensional instabilities that suggested the barriers between realities were weakening in ways that could lead to catastrophic convergences or separations. His connection to the Guardians of the Universe provided access to ancient knowledge about multiversal structure and the cosmic forces that maintained separation between different dimensional frameworks. The Flash's connection to the Speed Force began revealing its role as a fundamental constant that existed across multiple realities, providing both the mechanism for travel between dimensions and the stability that prevented their complete convergence or separation. His scientific understanding helped him comprehend the mathematical principles that governed multiversal relationships, while his speed allowed him to serve as an early warning system for dimensional anomalies. The discovery of beings whose power operated on truly cosmic scales began with subtle alterations in astronomical observations that suggested the presence of intelligences capable of manipulating matter and energy on galactic levels. These entities, known to advanced civilizations throughout the universe as the Monitor and his antimatter counterpart, represented forces so fundamental that their conflicts could reshape the very structure of existence itself. The Monitor's first contact with Earth's defenders came through cryptic warnings about approaching dangers that threatened not merely their world, but the entire positive matter multiverse. His appearances were brief and enigmatic, providing just enough information to suggest the scope of the threat, while withholding details that might have allowed for adequate preparation or understanding. The philosophical implications of beings whose perspective encompassed multiple realities and entire universal lifespans challenged every assumption about the meaning of individual existence and the significance of personal choices. If entities existed whose consciousness spanned dimensions and whose lifespans measured in cosmic epochs, then what significance could the struggles of individual worlds or civilizations possibly possess from such perspectives? Yet the Monitor's apparent concern for the preservation of positive matter reality suggested that even cosmic beings recognized value in diversity, creativity, and the unpredictable developments that emerged from the interactions of countless individual consciousnesses pursuing their own purposes and dreams. His warnings implied that the universe's complexity and richness were worth preserving against forces that would reduce everything to uniform simplicity. The first encounters with Darkside of Apocalypse introduced the heroes to a form of evil that transcended personal ambition or simple conquest, representing instead a philosophical position about the nature of existence itself and the proper relationship between order and freedom. His power was matched only by his absolute conviction that conscious beings were better served by the elimination of choice and the burden of individual responsibility. The new gods of both New Genesis and Apocalypse operated according to principles that challenged terrestrial understanding of the relationship between science and mythology, technology and magic, individual will and cosmic destiny. Their conflicts played out on scales that dwarfed planetary concerns, while incorporating philosophical questions about the nature of consciousness, free will, and the meaning of existence that had relevance for beings at every level of development. Darkseid's search for the anti-life equation represented more than mere conquest or domination, but rather the pursuit of a mathematical proof that would demonstrate the futility of individual existence and justify absolute submission to superior authority. His conviction that such an equation existed and could be discovered through systematic analysis of consciousness itself made him perhaps the most dangerous enemy the heroes would ever face. The arrival of Scott-Free and Big Barda from Apocalypse brought intimate knowledge of Darkseid's capabilities and methods, while also providing examples of individuals who had rejected the God of Evil's philosophy through personal experience of its consequences. Their escape from Apocalypse and choice to dedicate their lives to opposing tyranny in all its forms demonstrated that even beings raised in environments designed to crush individual will could choose freedom and love over security and submission. Mr. Miracle's mastery of escape artistry represented far more than mere entertainment or even tactical capability, embodying instead the fundamental principle that no prison, whether physical, psychological, or philosophical, could permanently contain conscious beings determined to be free. His relationship with Big Barda proved that love could flourish even in conditions designed to eliminate all traces of compassion and individual connection. The integration of these new gods into Earth's extended community of heroes created new capabilities and perspectives, while also attracting attention from forces that had previously been unaware of the planet's significance. Their presence served as both protection and provocation, demonstrating that Earth had become a nexus where conflicts spanning the galaxy could find resolution or escalation, depending upon the choices made by beings whose perspective remained fundamentally terrestrial despite their cosmic responsibilities. The heroes' growing awareness of their place in galactic civilization brought responsibilities and capabilities that none had anticipated when they first united to face the threat of Starro's conquest. Their individual development and collective maturation had prepared them for challenges that would test not only their powers and teamwork, but their fundamental understanding of justice, heroism, and the proper relationship between strength and service in a universe where godlike beings shape the destinies of countless worlds according to their own vision of perfection. The lessons learned from these cosmic encounters would prove essential preparation for the greater challenges that awaited them, as their reputation as effective defenders of their world attracted the attention of entities whose power and ambitions encompassed not merely single realities, but the entire multiversal structure that contained all possible forms of paean existence. Their unity had been forged in terrestrial conflicts and tested by interstellar wars. Yet the battles that lay ahead would require them to transcend even these expanded horizons to become guardians of possibility itself. The victory over the Thanagarian invasion and the successful resolution of the crime syndicate crisis had demonstrated that Earth's defenders possessed capabilities extending far beyond the protection of their homeworld. Yet these triumphs had also revealed the limitations of operating from terrestrial bases when confronting threats that spanned star systems and dimensional boundaries. The time had come for a fundamental evolution in their approach to safeguarding not merely their planet, but the broader community of worlds that had come to depend upon their intervention in conflicts that exceeded local defensive capabilities. The decision to establish a permanent presence beyond Earth's atmosphere was born from both practical necessity and philosophical recognition that their responsibilities had expanded to encompass challenges that could only be addressed through constant vigilance and immediate response. Capabilities. The construction of a satellite headquarters represented more than mere technological advancement. It symbolized their transformation from planetary protectors into cosmic guardians, whose mission encompassed the defense of principles and ideals that transcended the boundaries of any single world or civilization. Superman's scientific background proved invaluable in designing systems that could sustain human life in the hostile environment of space while providing the advanced technological capabilities necessary for monitoring and responding to threats across vast distances. His Kryptonian heritage gave him insights into technologies that could harness stellar energy for power generation, while his understanding of biological requirements ensured that the facility would remain habitable for extended periods by beings whose physiology had evolved for terrestrial conditions. Batman's strategic mind approached the satellite project as the ultimate expression of preparedness and technological superiority, designing defensive systems and contingency protocols that could protect the facility against any conceivable form of attack while maintaining operational effectiveness even under conditions of siege or systematic assault. His paranoia, so often criticized by allies who failed to understand its protective function, proved essential for anticipating vulnerabilities and failure modes that less suspicious minds might have overlooked. Wonder Woman's diplomatic experience guided the political and legal aspects of establishing a facility in international airspace that would serve as headquarters for operations affecting multiple nations and potentially entire civilizations. Her understanding of sovereignty and jurisdictional complexity helped navigate the delicate negotiations required to secure governmental cooperation and public support for what amounted to an extraterrestrial military installation under private control. The Flash's scientific expertise in materials, engineering, and energy systems contributed crucial innovations that made the satellite's construction feasible within reasonable timeframes and budgets. His ability to conduct research at superhuman speed accelerated the development process, while his forensic background ensured that every component met rigorous safety and reliability standards that would be essential for operations in the photic, unforgiving environment of space. Green Lantern's ring provided both the construction capabilities necessary for assembling the facility in orbit and the defensive systems required to protect it during the vulnerable construction phase. His connection to the Guardians of the Universe offered access to advanced technologies and construction techniques that had been refined through millennia of space-based operations, while his military experience guided the tactical, layout and operational protocols that would govern daily activities. Aquaman's understanding of closed ecological systems proved essential for designing life support and environmental control systems that could maintain optimal conditions for both human and alien team members while recycling resources with the efficiency necessary for long-term independent operation. His telepathic abilities contributed to communication systems that could function across vast distances and through various forms of interference that might disrupt conventional technologies. The Martian Manhunter's shape-shifting capabilities allowed him to serve multiple roles during construction, while his telepathic powers facilitated coordination between team members working in the challenging environment of Blaine, space. His experience with advanced alien technologies helped integrate systems from multiple sources into a coherent operational framework, while his psychological insights guided the design of living spaces that would maintain team morale, effectiveness during extended missions. The satellite headquarters that emerged from their collaborative efforts represented the pinnacle of what could be achieved through the combination of terrestrial ingenuity, alien technology, and superhuman capabilities working in harmony toward common goals. Its rotating sections provided artificial gravity for team members who required such conditions, while its central core remained in zero gravity for operations that benefited from weightless environments and unrestricted three-dimensional movement. The communication systems incorporated quantum entanglement protocols that allowed instantaneous contact across interstellar distances while maintaining security through encryption methods that would remain unbreakable even by civilizations whose technological development exceeded Earth's by millions of years. The facility's sensors could detect energy signatures and spatial anomalies throughout the solar system, while its databases maintained comprehensive records of known threats and their tactical capabilities. The defensive systems represented Batman's paranoia elevated to cosmic scales, incorporating energy shields that could deflect attacks from capital ships, while teleportation scramblers prevented unauthorized materialization within secure areas. Automated response protocols could engage multiple threat categories simultaneously while maintaining life support and operational effectiveness, even during prolonged conflicts that might isolate the facility from terrestrial support systems. The expansion of team membership that accompanied the satellite era reflected both the increased scope of their responsibilities and the recognition that effective cosmic defense required diverse capabilities and perspectives that no small group could provide, regardless of individual power levels. The addition of new members was guided by careful evaluation of not merely their abilities but their psychological compatibility with existing team dynamics and their commitment to the principles that had guided the organization since its bent in cray inception. Ralph Dibny, the elongated man, brought detective skills that rivaled Batman's analytical capabilities, while his rubber-like powers provided tactical flexibility and reconnaissance capabilities that proved invaluable for investigations requiring infiltration of restricted areas or surveillance of suspects whose activities required extended observation. His marriage to Sue provided the team with insights into normal human perspectives on their activities, while his natural optimism helped maintain morale during difficult periods when the weight of cosmic responsibility threatened to overwhelm individual members. Red Tornado emerged as perhaps the most unique addition to their ranks, an android whose artificial consciousness challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of sentience and moral responsibility, while providing capabilities that exceeded those of most organic team members. His lack of biological requirements made him ideally suited for extended space operations, while his computational abilities allowed him to process vast amounts of data simultaneously during crisis situations that required rapid analysis and response coordination. The creation of John Smith's civilian identity demonstrated the android's desire to understand human society through direct participation rather than mere observation. Yet his struggles with emotional development and social integration revealed the complexity of consciousness that transcended simple programming or artificial intelligence. His relationship with his creator and his growing connections with human society provided the team with insights into questions about identity, purpose, and belonging that had relevance extending far beyond artificial beings. Firestorm represented the ultimate fusion of human consciousness with cosmic forces, the nuclear man whose powers derived from the fundamental forces that governed atomic structure and stellar processes. The unique nature of his dual identity, with Professor Martin Stein's scientific knowledge merged with Ronnie Raymond's youthful energy and idealism, created a being whose capabilities were matched by the complexity of his psychological structure and decision-making processes. The philosophical implications of Firestorm's existence raised questions about individual identity and collective consciousness that had profound relevance for understanding the nature of heroism and responsibility. His ability to transmute matter at the atomic level provided solutions to problems that had previously seemed insurmountable, while his connection to nuclear forces made him uniquely qualified to address threats involving stellar, engineering, or exotic physics applications. The establishment of 24-hour operational schedules reflected the recognition that cosmic threats operated according to timelines that bore no relationship to terrestrial day-night cycles or human circadian rhythms. The satellite's crew rotation systems ensured that qualified team members remained on duty at all times, while providing adequate rest and recovery periods for beings whose extraordinary capabilities required them to maintain peak performance levels indefinitely. The psychological challenges of extended space operations proved as demanding as any external threat the team faced, requiring careful attention to maintaining individual mental health and group cohesion, while isolated from the familiar environments and support systems that had sustained their earlier development. The satellite's recreational facilities and communication systems were designed to prevent the claustrophobia and social isolation that had proven problematic for earlier space missions involving normal humans. Superman's role as team coordinator expanded to encompass responsibilities that had previously been shared among multiple members. Yet his commitment to democratic decision-making ensured that major strategic choices continued to reflect collective judgment rather than individual preference. His ability to function effectively in both space and terrestrial environments made him uniquely qualified to serve as liaison between satellite operations and ground-based activities while maintaining operational continuity across species, multiple theaters of engagement. Batman's intelligence networks expanded to encompass interplanetary sources and surveillance systems that could monitor activities throughout the solar system while maintaining the security protocols necessary for protecting sensitive information from hostile intelligence services. His strategic planning capabilities proved essential for coordinating complex operations that required precise timing and resource allocation across vast distances and multiple operational theaters. Wonder Woman's diplomatic responsibilities expanded to include formal negotiations with galactic civilizations whose political structures and cultural values bore no resemblance to terrestrial institutions, yet whose cooperation proved essential for maintaining peace and stability across sectors of space that affected Earth's security interests. Her understanding of power dynamics and conflict resolution provided frameworks for managing disputes that could escalate into interstellar wars if not addressed through skilled mediation. The Flash's scientific research expanded to encompass phenomena that could only be studied in the unique environment of space, while his speed allowed him to conduct reconnaissance missions throughout the solar system with response times that made real-time intelligence gathering feasible for the first time. His forensic background proved invaluable for analyzing evidence of alien activities and technological developments that might indicate emerging threats or opportunities for beneficial cooperation. Green Lantern's connection to the core provided the satellite with access to galactic communication networks and intelligence resources that would have been impossible to obtain through terrestrial sources, while his rings' capabilities made him uniquely effective for responding to crises that required immediate intervention across vast distances. His military experience guided the development of tactical protocols for space-based operations that had no precedent in human military doctrine. Aquaman's role expanded to encompass protection of space-based water supplies and life support systems, while his telepathic abilities proved effective for communicating with alien species whose mental structures bore sufficient similarity to terrestrial consciousness to permit meaningful exchange of information and concepts. His understanding of ecological relationships provided insights into the complex interdependencies that governed galactic civilization and the potential consequences of disrupting established patterns through military intervention or technological assistance. The Martian Manhunter's shape-shifting abilities made him uniquely effective for diplomatic missions that required direct cultural interaction with alien species whose physical forms and social structures differed dramatically from human norms, while his telepathic powers provided intelligence-gathering capabilities that conventional reconnaissance methods could never achieve. His status as refugee and adopted citizen of Earth gave him unique perspectives on the challenges faced by beings caught between multiple worlds and competing loyalties. The first major test of their satellite-based operations came through the escape of Kryptonian criminals from the Phantom Zone, a dimensional prison whose security protocols had been compromised by cosmic phenomena that Earth's defenders had been uniquely positioned to detect and analyze. The emergence of beings whose power levels equaled or exceeded Superman's own capabilities presented challenges that could not be addressed through conventional tactical approaches or standard operational procedures. General Zod's emergence as leader of the escaped criminals represented more than mere criminal activity or personal vendetta, but rather a fundamental challenge to the principles that had guided Superman's integration into human society. Zod's military background and authoritarian philosophy offered alternative approaches to using Kryptonian abilities that emphasized conquest and domination rather than service and protection, creating ideological conflicts that transcended simple hero-villain dynamics. The Phantom Criminals' advanced understanding of Kryptonian technology and their intimate knowledge of Superman's psychological vulnerabilities enabled them to devise strategies that exploited weaknesses that terrestrial opponents had never suspected or been capable of targeting. Effectively, their ability to match Superman's physical capabilities while operating without moral restraints created tactical situations that required unprecedented levels of coordination and strategic thinking from all team members. Ursa's savage warrior mentality and complete disdain for human life made her uniquely dangerous among opponents whose power levels approached cosmic scales, while her loyalty to Zod provided him with an enforcer whose ruthlessness matched her capabilities. Her presence forced the team to develop non-lethal containment strategies that could be effective against beings whose strength exceeded that of most terrestrial military hardware, while operating under moral constraints that their opponents felt no obligation to observe. Non's mute but incredibly powerful presence created psychological warfare opportunities that the Phantom Criminals exploited through systematic destruction of infrastructure and civilian targets that forced the heroes to respond reactively rather than pursuing proactive strategies that might have proven more effective against enemies whose capabilities were well documented through previous encounters with Superman. The resolution of the Phantom Crisis required the development of new technologies and tactical approaches that could contain beings whose power levels exceeded anything previously encountered, while maintaining the moral standards that defined heroic intervention. The satellite's advanced laboratories and manufacturing capabilities proved essential for creating specialized equipment and containment systems that could function effectively against Kryptonian-level threats. The psychological impact of confronting enemies who shared Superman's heritage while rejecting everything he represented created internal conflicts that threatened team cohesion while demonstrating the importance of moral choice in New Thing, determining how extraordinary abilities would be employed. The victory that eventually emerged validated the principles that had guided their development, while proving that ethical considerations enhanced rather than limited their effectiveness against opponents whose power was unrestrained by the case's conscience or compassion. The expansion of their operational scope to encompass stellar conflicts and galactic politics brought responsibilities and challenges that tested their understanding of justice and intervention in ways that terrestrial experience had not prepared them to address. The Green Lantern Corps' inclusion of Earth's defenders in sector-wide operations demonstrated their growing reputation and capabilities, while also exposing them to forms of corruption and moral compromise that had not been significant factors in their previous activities. The relationship between individual conscience and organizational loyalty became increasingly complex as their involvement in galactic affairs required them to navigate political situations where the moral clarity that had guided their terrestrial operations was obscured by competing cultural values and strategic considerations that transcended simple right versus wrong distinctions. The Corps' military structure and authoritarian decision-making processes created tensions with their commitment to democratic principles and individual responsibility that required careful navigation to maintain both effectiveness and integrity. The stellar engineering projects that they encountered during these operations revealed forms of technology and strategic thinking that operated on scales exceeding planetary concerns, while demonstrating the potential consequences of unrestrained power exercised without adequate moral guidance. The destruction of entire star systems for strategic advantage or resource acquisition represented forms of evil that challenged their understanding of the relationship between means and ends, while requiring responses that could prevent such atrocities without becoming complicit in equally questionable activities. The discovery of civilizations whose development had been guided by principles fundamentally different from those that had shaped human evolution provided insights into alternative approaches to consciousness, society, and the use of advanced capabilities that had profound implications for understanding the nature of heroism and moral responsibility. The team's interactions with these alien cultures tested their ability to maintain their core values, while adapting their methods to accommodate different perspectives on individual rights, collective welfare, and the proper relationship between power and authority. The Detroit era represented a fundamental transition in the team's composition and operational philosophy, as founding members stepped back from active participation to pursue other responsibilities, while a new generation of heroes assumed primary operational duties. This transition reflected both the natural evolution of individual careers and the recognition that effective cosmic defense required continuous renewal of perspectives and capabilities to address emerging threats and changing strategic environments. The selection of younger heroes like Vixen, Steel, Vibe, and Gypsy reflected a commitment to diversity and fresh perspectives, while also acknowledging the importance of maintaining continuity with established principles and operational standards that had proven effective against cosmic-level threats. The integration of new members required extensive training and psychological evaluation to ensure compatibility with existing team dynamics, while providing them with the knowledge and experience necessary for effective participation in operations that could determine the fate of entire civilizations. Mari McCabe's connection to African spiritual traditions and her ability to channel the capabilities of various animal species provided the team with insights into forms of power that operated according to principles different from technological or genetic enhancement, while demonstrating the universal nature of consciousness and its relationship to natural forces that transcended cultural boundaries. Her background in modeling and fashion provided unexpected advantages for infiltration and diplomatic missions that required understanding of social dynamics and cultural signaling. Hank Haywood's technological integration and patriotic motivation represented evolution of the World War II hero tradition into forms appropriate for cosmic-level operations, while his scientific background contributed to the team's understanding of advanced materials and engineering, principles that proved essential for maintaining their equipment and facilities in the hostile environment of space. His struggle with the psychological implications of technological dependence provided insights into questions about identity and authenticity that had relevance for all team members whose capabilities exceeded normal human parameters. Paco Ramon's vibrational powers and street-smart background brought perspectives on urban culture and social justice that had been underrepresented in the team's previous composition, while his scientific curiosity led to innovations in communication and transportation technology that improved their operational effectiveness. His struggle with the responsibility of cosmic-level power while maintaining connection to his community and cultural heritage provided examples of how extraordinary abilities could enhance rather than separate individuals from their social roots. Cindy Reynolds' magical abilities and mysterious background provided the team with access to mystical forces and alternative approaches to problem solving that proved essential for addressing threats that operated according to principles beyond scientific understanding, while her illusion casting capabilities enhanced their tactical flexibility and reconnaissance effectiveness. Her struggle with questions about identity and belonging resonated with other team members whose extraordinary nature created challenges for maintaining normal relationships and social connections. The mentorship relationships that developed between experienced and junior team members reflected the organization's commitment to continuity and knowledge transfer, while also providing opportunities for established heroes to gain new perspectives on their mission and methods through interaction with individuals whose backgrounds and worldviews differed significantly from their own experiences. The success of these relationships proved essential for maintaining operational effectiveness during the transition period while preparing the next generation for the greater challenges that awaited them. The philosophical implications of this generational transition extended beyond mere operational considerations to encompass questions about legacy, responsibility, and the proper relationship between individual achievement and collective mission that had relevance for understanding the nature of heroism itself. The older generation's willingness to step back and allow younger heroes to assume primary responsibility demonstrated commitment to principles that transcended personal recognition, while the younger hero's dedication to maintaining established standards proved that the organization's values could survive changes in personnel and leadership. The challenges faced during this transition period tested every aspect of the team's institutional culture and operational capabilities, while demonstrating both the strengths and vulnerabilities of their approach to cosmic defense. The reduced experience levels and different perspectives of the newer members created opportunities for innovation and fresh approaches to familiar problems, while also increasing the risk of tactical errors and strategic miscalculations that could have catastrophic consequences for planetary security. The resolution of these challenges required the development of new training protocols and support systems that could accelerate the development of junior members, while maintaining operational readiness against threats that allowed no margin for error or extended learning periods. The satellite's advanced simulation systems and comprehensive databases proved essential for providing realistic training scenarios that could prepare new heroes for the psychological and tactical challenges they would face during actual cosmic-level operations. The success of the Detroit era in maintaining Earth's security, while integrating new perspectives and capabilities into established operational frameworks, demonstrated the resilience and adaptability of the principles that had guided the organization since its inception. The lessons learned during this period would prove invaluable for future transitions and expansions, while establishing precedents for leadership development and knowledge transfer that would serve the organization for generations to come. The growing recognition that their responsibilities encompassed not merely crisis response but also proactive prevention and long-term strategic planning led to expanded intelligence gathering operations and diplomatic initiatives that sought to address potential threats before they could develop into active conflicts requiring military intervention. The satellite's advanced sensor arrays and communication systems enabled monitoring of activities throughout local galactic sectors while maintaining the surveillance capabilities necessary for early warning of emerging dangers. The establishment of formal relationships with galactic law enforcement agencies and diplomatic institutions provided frameworks for cooperation and information sharing that enhanced their effectiveness while ensuring that their activities remained consistent with broader efforts to maintain peace and stability across civilizations, whose development levels and strategic interests varied enormously. These relationships required careful navigation of political sensitivities and jurisdictional boundaries while maintaining the independence necessary for effective moral leadership. The expansion of their mission scope to encompass education and cultural exchange reflected recognition that lasting security required more than military deterrence and crisis response, but rather the development of shared values and mutual understanding that could prevent conflicts from arising through improved communication and cooperation between diverse civilizations. The satellite served as hosting facility for diplomatic conferences and cultural exchange programs that brought together representatives from worlds whose development had proceeded along entirely different evolutionary and technological paths. The establishment of Earth as a neutral ground for galactic diplomacy reflected both the planet's unique position as a world protected by indigenous champions and its inhabitants' relative inexperience with interstellar politics that made them valuable mediators in disputes between civilizations whose ancient rivalries and competing interests might otherwise prevent productive negotiation. The hero's reputation for moral integrity and effective problem-solving made them trusted facilitators for discussions that could determine the peace or war across entire sectors of space. The success of these expanded activities demonstrated that heroism could encompass far more than combat effectiveness and crisis response, while proving that the principles that had guided their development remained relevant and effective when applied to challenges that exceeded anything their founders had envisioned when they first united to face the threat of alien conquest. Their evolution from planetary defenders into cosmic peacekeepers represented the natural maturation of their mission and capabilities, while maintaining the moral foundation that had made their initial success possible. The satellite era had demonstrated that Earth's defenders could evolve their capabilities and scope of operations to match the expanding nature of threats that emerged from a universe filled with hostile intelligences and cosmic forces beyond terrestrial comprehension. Yet, as the 1980s drew to a close and new decades beckoned with promises of technological advancement and social evolution, signs began to appear that suggested the multiverse itself was experiencing fundamental instabilities that threatened not merely individual worlds or civilizations, but the very structure of reality across all possible dimensions of existence. The first indications of these approaching catastrophes manifested as subtle alterations in the quantum foam that underlay the fabric of space and time, fluctuations so minute that only the most sensitive instruments could detect them, while their implications remained hidden from all but the most sophisticated theoretical physicists whose mathematical models suggested impossible conclusions about the relationship between matter, energy, and consciousness itself. These were not random variations in natural constants, but systematic modifications that followed patterns too complex and purposeful to represent anything other than deliberate manipulation by intelligences whose capabilities exceeded those of entire galactic civilizations. The Monitor, that enigmatic cosmic entity whose previous warnings about multiversal threats had proven frustratingly vague yet ultimately accurate, began appearing with increased frequency to beings across multiple realities, his communications growing more urgent and specific as the timeline for catastrophic convergence accelerated beyond his ability to implement adequate protective measures through conventional means. His ancient adversary stirred in the depths of antimatter space, that twisted reflection of positive reality where the fundamental forces operated according to inverted principles that sought the elimination rather than creation of complexity and consciousness. The crisis that would come to be known as the Crisis on Infinite Earths began not with the dramatic arrival of cosmic armies or the appearance of reality-threatening weapons, but with the quiet disappearance of entire universes whose existence was erased so completely that only beings with direct multiversal awareness could detect their absence. These were not conquests or destructions in any conventional sense, but rather systematic deletions from the cosmic database of reality, worlds and timelines that simply ceased to have ever existed as waves of antimatter swept through dimensions that had sheltered billions of thinking beings. The scope of the threat became apparent when the Monitor's network of observation points began reporting the sequential elimination of parallel Earths, each representing a complete reality with its own history, cultures, and populations that were being reduced to nothingness by forces that operated beyond the reach of conventional physics or military response. Earth 3, home of the crime syndicate whose earlier encounters with the Justice League had revealed the existence of parallel dimensions, became one of the first casualties as antimatter waves swept through its reality matrix and left behind only empty space where an entire universe had once flourished. The heroes of the remaining Earths found themselves facing challenges that exceeded anything in their previous experience. For their enemies were not beings who could be fought or negotiated with, but rather fundamental forces of cosmic entropy that sought the reduction of all existence to the pristine simplicity of absolute void. The antimatter waves that preceded the shadow demons represented more than mere destruction. They embodied the philosophical opposite of everything that consciousness had achieved through billions of years of evolution and development. Superman's confrontation with these cosmic forces revealed the limitations of even Kryptonian power when applied against enemies whose nature transcended the physical laws that governed normal reality. His strength, speed, and invulnerability proved meaningless against adversaries who could simply erase the dimensional framework that supported his existence, while his moral clarity provided no guidance for engaging opponents whose elimination would itself constitute a form of universal genocide. Batman's analytical mind struggled to comprehend enemies whose strategies operated according to principles that inverted every assumption about cause and effect, tactical planning, and the relationship between means and ends that had guided his previous development of countermeasures against seemingly impossible threats. His contingency plans proved useless against adversaries whose capabilities included the power to retroactively eliminate the timelines in which those plans had been conceived and implemented. Wonder Woman's warrior training provided frameworks for understanding cosmic conflict, yet her divine heritage offered no protection against forces that could unmake the very gods from whom her powers derived, while her diplomatic skills proved irrelevant when applied to entities whose existence was predicated upon the elimination of all possible subjects for negotiation or compromise. The Flash's connection to the Speed Force revealed its role as one of the fundamental constants that maintained multiversal stability, while demonstrating that even forces that transcended individual realities could be threatened by antimatter manipulation of the basic principles that governed existence across all possible dimensions. His scientific understanding helped him comprehend the mathematical elegance of the destruction, even as his moral conviction rejected its philosophical implications. Green Lantern's ring constructs could temporarily slow the advance of antimatter waves, yet his connection to the Guardians of the Universe provided access to ancient records that documented previous multiversal crises whose resolution had required sacrifices that challenged every principle of individual worth and collective responsibility that had guided the development of galactic civilization. Aquaman's telepathic abilities detected the psychic screams of entire realities as they were consumed by forces that eliminated not merely physical existence, but the very possibility of ever having existed, while his understanding of ecological relationships helped him comprehend the systematic nature of the destruction and its implications for the survival of consciousness itself across all possible timelines. The Martian Manhunter's telepathic powers made him uniquely vulnerable to the psychological impact of multiversal genocide, while his shape-shifting abilities proved useless against enemies who could eliminate the dimensional matrices that supported his molecular cohesion. His status as the last survivor of his species gave him insights into the meaning of absolute loss that proved crucial for understanding the stakes involved in multiversal preservation. The recruitment of heroes and villains from across the remaining realities created unprecedented alliances that transcended traditional moral categories, as beings who had spent lifetimes in opposition found themselves united against enemies whose victory would eliminate all possible futures, regardless of their ethical orientations. The philosophical implications of cooperation between heroes and villains challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of good and evil, while demonstrating that survival itself could serve as a unifying principle that transcended individual moral commitments. Lex Luthor's scientific genius and vast resources proved invaluable for developing technologies that could function across multiple realities, while his intimate knowledge of Superman's capabilities helped coordinate strategies that took advantage of Kryptonian abilities in ways that individual heroes had never considered. His transformation from enemy into ally represented a temporary suspension rather than abandonment of his personal vendetta, yet his effectiveness demonstrated that intellect and determination could serve constructive purposes when properly motivated by existential necessity. The Joker's unpredictable nature and complete disregard for conventional logic made him uniquely effective against shadow demons, whose tactics were based upon fear and psychological manipulation. Yet his participation in multiversal defense operations required constant supervision by heroes who understood that his cooperation remained contingent upon his personal amusement, rather than genuine commitment to preserving existence. Brainiac's vast computational abilities and multiversal databases provided crucial intelligence about antimatter phenomena and potential countermeasures, while his collection of miniaturized civilizations offered examples of preservation technologies that might be scaled up to protect entire realities. His android nature made him partially immune to the psychological weapons employed by shadow demons, while his lack of emotions allowed him to calculate sacrifice ratios and acceptable loss percentages without the moral constraints that paralyzed more compassionate defenders. The Monitor's desperate gambit of recruiting champions from across the multiverse revealed both the scope of the crisis and the inadequacy of conventional heroic responses when confronted with enemies whose power operated on truly cosmic scales. His ancient conflict with the Anti-Monitor had escalated beyond personal vendetta into a fundamental struggle between creation and destruction, order and entropy, the complexity of existence, and the simplicity of absolute void. The towers that the Monitor constructed across multiple realities served as anchor points that could slow the advance of antimatter waves while providing staging areas for coordinated defensive operations that required precise timing across dimensional boundaries. These technological marvels represented the culmination of scientific development that spanned millions of years, yet their effectiveness remained limited by the fundamental nature of the forces they opposed. The sacrifice of Supergirl during the assault on the Anti-Monitor's fortress represented more than the loss of an individual hero, but rather the recognition that victory against cosmic-level threats might require the ultimate payment from beings whose power approached the levels of their enemies. Her death served as both tactical achievement and symbolic statement about the price of preserving existence against forces that sought its complete elimination. Barry Allen's sacrifice during the destruction of the Anti-Monitor's antimatter cannon demonstrated that even beings whose connection to fundamental forces gave them near immortality were not exempt from the ultimate price that cosmic conflicts demanded from their participants. His integration with the Speed Force during the moment of his death prevented the cannon from eliminating all positive matter realities while establishing precedents for the kinds of choices that cosmic defenders might be required to make. The merging of the surviving Earths into a single reality represented both victory and loss, preserving the essence of multiple timelines while eliminating the infinite diversity that had made the multiverse a repository of unlimited possibility and creative potential. The new unified Earth contained elements from multiple realities, yet lacked the vast scope for experimentation and alternative development that parallel dimensions had provided for countless eons. The psychological impact of these changes on surviving heroes challenged their understanding of identity, continuity, and the meaning of individual existence in ways that would require years or decades to fully process and integrate. Beings who retained memories of multiple realities found themselves living in a world where their personal histories had been altered or eliminated, while others discovered that their most cherished relationships and achievements had been retroactively modified by forces beyond their comprehension or control. Superman's memories of multiple versions of his life created internal conflicts about which experiences were authentic and which relationships held genuine meaning when all had been shaped by cosmic forces that operated beyond individual choice or consent. His commitment to truth and justice remained constant, yet the foundation for these principles had been fundamentally altered by changes in his personal history and the elimination of alternative timelines that had contained different versions of his moral development. Batman's contingency plans and strategic frameworks required complete revision to account for a reality where previous assumptions about cause and effect had been modified by multiversal restructuring, while his detective methods needed adaptation for investigating crimes and mysteries in a world where evidence might have been altered by cosmic forces rather than individual actors. Wonder Woman's diplomatic relationships and cultural connections had been transformed by changes that affected not merely personal relationships, but the entire history of Amazonian civilization and its interactions with the broader world. While her warrior training required adaptation to conflicts that might involve enemies whose nature had been altered by reality restructuring, the Flash's connection to the Speed Force had been fundamentally changed by Barry Allen's sacrifice and integration with cosmic forces, creating new responsibilities and capabilities that exceeded his previous understanding while requiring him to navigate relationships with forces that operated beyond individual consciousness or conventional moral frameworks. Green Lantern's ring responded to alterations in universal structure that affected the fundamental constants that governed its operation, while his connection to the core required renegotiation of relationships with Guardians whose own understanding of reality had been challenged by multiversal restructuring. Aquaman's telepathic connection to marine life revealed changes in the psychological patterns of ocean-dwelling creatures that reflected broader alterations in the relationship between consciousness and physical reality, while his role as ruler required navigation of political situations that had been transformed by historical changes beyond conventional understanding. The Martian Manhunter's shape-shifting abilities operated according to principles that had been modified by reality, restructuring, while his telepathic powers detected psychological patterns in other beings that reflected the complex relationship between memory and identity in a world where both had been cosmically altered. The formation of the legends represented an attempt to address the temporal disruptions and historical anomalies that had resulted from multiversal restructuring while providing frameworks for heroic intervention in situations where conventional approaches proved inadequate. This new team combined time travel capabilities with diverse skill sets that could address threats across multiple historical periods, while maintaining operational security in eras whose technological and social development might be contaminated by knowledge of future events. The recruitment of heroes whose backgrounds spanned different historical periods created unique operational capabilities, while also generating internal conflicts between individuals whose worldviews had been shaped by vastly different social and technological circumstances. The integration of these diverse perspectives required careful navigation of cultural differences and moral frameworks that had evolved along separate paths yet needed coordination for effective teamwork. Rip Hunter's time travel expertise provided the technical foundation for operations that required precise navigation of temporal mechanics, while his understanding of historical processes helped the team avoid actions that might generate paradoxes or unintended consequences that could destabilize the already fragile structure of post-crisis reality. The challenges faced by the legends revealed the complexity of heroic intervention in historical processes, while demonstrating that even well-intentioned actions could generate unintended consequences that required additional intervention to prevent cascading effects across multiple time periods. The team's activities highlighted the delicate balance between preserving historical continuity and preventing injustices that might be addressed through careful temporal manipulation. The success of the legends in addressing temporal anomalies while maintaining historical stability demonstrated that heroic principles could be effectively applied across different time periods and cultural contexts, while proving that the heroic principles, fundamental values that guided cosmic defense, remained relevant regardless of technological or social development levels. The formation of Justice League International represented an attempt to expand the organization's global reach and cultural diversity, while addressing criticisms about its predominantly American orientation and limited representation of different national perspectives and approaches to heroic intervention. This expansion required careful navigation of international political sensitivities, while maintaining operational effectiveness and moral consistency across different cultural frameworks. The inclusion of government oversight and financial support created new opportunities for expanded operations, while also introducing political complications and bureaucratic constraints that had not been significant factors in previous organizational structures. The balance between independence and accountability required constant negotiation between competing interests and values that sometimes conflicted with heroic principles. Booster Gold's time-displaced perspective and corporate approach to heroism provided insights into alternative frameworks for understanding the relationship between public service and personal advancement, while his future knowledge created ethical dilemmas about the proper use of information that could prevent disasters or solve problems that might be better addressed through conventional means. Blue Beetle's technological expertise and scientific curiosity contributed to the team's problem-solving capabilities, while his partnership with Booster Gold demonstrated the importance of personal relationships and mutual support in maintaining morale and effectiveness during extended operations involving complex cultural and political challenges. Fire and ice represented international perspectives on heroism and justice, while their partnership demonstrated the effectiveness of complementary abilities and compatible personalities in creating tactical combinations that exceeded the sum of individual capabilities. Their integration into the team provided examples of successful cross-cultural cooperation while highlighting the universal nature of heroic values. The lighter tone and more optimistic approach that characterized Justice League International reflected both the reduced cosmic threat level following the crisis and the recognition that heroic intervention could encompass a broader range of activities than crisis response and military operations. The team's activities demonstrated that heroism could be expressed through community service, diplomatic mediation, and social problem solving as effectively as through combat against supervillains and alien invaders. The eventual return to more traditional organizational structures and membership reflected the recognition that cosmic-level threats continued to emerge, while international operations had revealed both the benefits and limitations of government partnership and bureaucratic oversight. The lessons learned during the international period provided valuable insights into alternative approaches to heroic organization, while establishing precedents for future expansion and adaptation. The reformation of the classic Justice League, with original members returning to active participation, represented both continuity with established traditions and evolution in response to changing threat environments and operational requirements. The combination of experienced leadership with fresh perspectives created optimal conditions for addressing challenges that required both tactical innovation and institutional memory. The establishment of the Watchtower headquarters on the Moon represented the ultimate expression of their commitment to cosmic defense, while providing capabilities that exceeded even the satellite era's technological achievements. The lunar facility offered unlimited expansion potential, while maintaining security through isolation from terrestrial political and social pressures that might compromise operational effectiveness. The advanced technologies incorporated into the Watchtower reflected lessons learned from previous headquarters, while anticipating future requirements for monitoring and responding to threats that operated on galactic scales. The facility's defensive systems and communication networks established new standards for cosmic defense operations, while providing models that could be adapted by other civilizations facing similar challenges. The success of the reformed Justice League in addressing post-crisis threats while maintaining moral clarity and operational effectiveness demonstrated the resilience of principles that had guided their development since the organization's inception. Their evolution from planetary defenders into multiversal guardians represented the natural maturation of their mission, while preserving the essential values that made their intervention beneficial rather than merely powerful. The dawn of the 1990s brought with it a period of unprecedented transformation for Earth's mightiest heroes. As the complexities introduced by the crisis on Infinite Earths and its aftermath gradually resolved themselves into new patterns of cooperation and coordination that would define their operations for decades to come. The lessons learned from multiversal catastrophe and reality restructuring had fundamentally altered their understanding of their mission and responsibilities, yet the essential principles that had guided their formation remained constant beacons of hope and justice in a cosmos that seemed increasingly determined to test the limits of heroic resolve and moral clarity. Grant Morrison's visionary approach to chronicling their adventures during this era captured something essential about the mythological dimension of their existence, transforming what might have been simple adventure stories into modern legends that spoke to fundamental questions about power, responsibility, and the relationship between individual conscience and collective purpose. His understanding of the heroes as contemporary expressions of archetypal forces that had shaped human consciousness since the dawn of civilization provided frameworks for comprehending their significance that transcended entertainment or escapist fantasy. The reformation of the Justice League, as the Big Seven, represented both a return to foundational principles and an evolution in response to cosmic-level challenges that required the ultimate expression of coordinated, heroic capability. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Green Lantern, Aquaman, and the Martian Manhunter brought together the full spectrum of abilities and perspectives that had proven essential for addressing threats whose scope exceeded anything that individual heroes could confront, regardless of their personal power levels or tactical sophistication. The establishment of the Watchtower on the moon's surface represented the culmination of decades of technological development and strategic thinking that had begun with the satellite headquarters and evolved through successive iterations of increasing capability and cosmic awareness. This lunar facility embodied humanity's greatest achievement in space-based construction while incorporating alien technologies and scientific principles that elevated it beyond anything that terrestrial engineering could have accomplished through conventional means. The Watchtower's location provided strategic advantages that exceeded those of any previous headquarters, while maintaining the symbolic significance of establishing a permanent human presence beyond Earth's atmosphere in service of ideals that transcended planetary boundaries. The facility's monitoring systems could observe activities throughout the solar system, while its defensive capabilities could protect Earth against threats that approached from any vector across three-dimensional space or through dimensional gateways that bypassed conventional spatial relationships. The advanced transportation systems incorporated into the Watchtower reflected Morrison's understanding of hypertime and the complex relationships between parallel timelines that had survived the crisis in modified forms that allowed for interaction and coordination between alternate versions of heroic archetypes. The teleportation platforms could access not merely different locations within normal space, but also alternative probability streams, where different versions of familiar heroes pursued similar missions according to slightly modified parameters. Superman's role within this reformed league reflected his evolution from isolated alien refugee into the moral center of a cosmic community whose responsibilities encompassed the protection of fundamental principles rather than merely specific populations or geographic territories. His scientific background and Kryptonian heritage provided him with perspectives on universal constants and natural laws that proved essential for understanding threats that operated on scales exceeding planetary or even stellar concerns. The psychological complexity that Morrison brought to Superman's characterization revealed the profound loneliness that accompanied his unique position as mediator between human and cosmic perspectives, while demonstrating that even beings of extraordinary capability required the support and understanding of peers who shared similar burdens and responsibilities. His relationships with other League members provided him with the emotional foundation necessary for maintaining moral clarity under pressures that might have overwhelmed individual conscience. Batman's participation in cosmic-level operations required him to adapt his methodical approach to crime fighting and strategic planning to challenges that operated according to principles that exceeded the scope of terrestrial detective work or conventional military tactics. His analytical mind proved capable of comprehending alien psychology and multi-dimensional physics, while his dedication to preparation and contingency planning remained effective even when applied to enemies whose capabilities bordered on omnipotence. The apparent contradiction between Batman's street-level origins and his effectiveness in cosmic conflicts was resolved through recognition that the fundamental principles of investigation, analysis, and strategic thinking that guided his approach to crime fighting were universal constants that remained valid regardless of the scale or nature of the problems they were applied to address. His refusal to be intimidated by superior power or incomprehensible capabilities made him uniquely valuable for missions that required direct confrontation with entities that other heroes might find psychologically overwhelming. Wonder Woman's diplomatic background and warrior training provided the League with capabilities that proved essential for navigating the complex political and cultural relationships that governed interactions between advanced civilizations whose development had proceeded along paths entirely different from terrestrial experience. Her understanding of power dynamics and conflict resolution enabled her to serve as mediator in disputes that could escalate into interstellar wars, if not addressed through skilled negotiation and cultural sensitivity. The mythological dimensions of Wonder Woman's heritage connected the League to forces and entities that operated according to principles predating scientific understanding, while remaining relevant to contemporary challenges involving the relationship between consciousness and reality. Her access to divine knowledge and magical capabilities provided alternative approaches to problem-solving that proved invaluable when conventional methods failed against enemies whose nature transcended physical laws or logical analysis. The Flash's connection to the Speed Force revealed its role as one of the fundamental constants that maintained stability across multiple realities, while providing him with capabilities that exceeded simple velocity enhancement to encompass time travel, dimensional access, and manipulation of probability streams that allowed for tactical advantages that conventional physics could not explain or predict. His scientific background helped him understand and communicate the theoretical principles that governed these abilities, while his moral clarity ensured that such power remained in service of protective rather than exploitative purposes. The exploration of hypertime concepts through Flash's adventures revealed the complex relationships between parallel timelines and alternate realities that had survived the crisis in modified forms, creating opportunities for cooperation and coordination between different versions of heroic archetypes, while also introducing dangers associated with temporal paradoxes and causality violations that could destabilize the already fragile structure of post-crisis reality. Green Lantern's ring constructs and connection to the core provided the League with access to galactic intelligence networks and advanced technologies, while his military background contributed strategic frameworks for coordinating operations across vast distances and multiple theaters of engagement. His willpower-based abilities demonstrated the fundamental importance of moral conviction and psychological strength in determining the effectiveness of cosmic-level heroic intervention. The relationship between individual will and universal forces that governed Green Lantern's powers reflected broader themes about the importance of personal choice and moral commitment in shaping the outcome of conflicts between order and chaos, creation and destruction, hope and despair that defined the cosmic environment within which the League operated. His effectiveness depended not merely on his personal courage, but on his ability to inspire similar dedication in allies whose own capabilities might be enhanced through exposure to his example. Aquaman's telepathic abilities and command of oceanic environments provided the League with capabilities that proved essential for addressing threats that originated from or operated within Earth's vast water systems, while his experience as ruler of Atlantis contributed diplomatic and leadership skills that complemented Wonder Woman's approaches to international and interspecies cooperation. His dual loyalty to surface and oceanic civilizations made him uniquely effective as mediator between different environmental and cultural perspectives. The expansion of Aquaman's role to encompass protection of all aquatic environments throughout the solar system reflected the recognition that Earth's defenders had responsibilities extending beyond their homeworld to include other bodies of water that might harbor life or serve as staging areas for hostile forces seeking to establish footholds within the solar system's defensive perimeter. The Martian Manhunter's telepathic powers and shape-shifting abilities made him uniquely effective for intelligence gathering and infiltration missions that required direct interaction with alien cultures whose psychology, social structures differed dramatically from human norms, while his experience as refugee and adopted citizen provided him with insights into questions of identity and belonging that proved relevant for understanding the motivations of other displaced beings. The psychological burden that John Johns carried as the sole survivor of his species gave him unique empathy for other beings who had lost everything, while demonstrating that such losses could be transformed into strengths that enhanced rather than diminished one's capacity for service and protection. His dedication to his adopted homeworld and chosen family provided examples of how extraordinary capabilities could be directed toward healing and growth rather than revenge or despair. The Tower of Babel incident represented perhaps the most significant internal crisis the League had faced since their formation, as the revelation that Batman had developed comprehensive contingency plans for neutralizing his teammates' abilities in case they ever posed threats to innocent populations created philosophical and emotional conflicts that challenged the foundation of trust upon which their collaboration depended. Ra's al Ghul's theft and implementation of these contingency plans demonstrated how preparations designed to protect society from potential abuse of power could themselves become weapons in the hands of enemies who understood the psychological vulnerabilities that such planning revealed. The effectiveness of the attacks proved that Batman's analysis of his teammates' capabilities and weaknesses had been disturbingly accurate, while his failure to inform them of these preparations violated principles of transparency and mutual respect that were essential for maintaining team cohesion. The moral complexity of Batman's position reflected genuine philosophical tensions between individual accountability and collective trust, between preparation for worst-case scenarios and faith in the essential goodness of one's allies, between pragmatic recognition of human fallibility and idealistic commitment to believing the best of those who had earned such consideration through years of sacrifice and service. Superman's response to the revelation of Batman's contingency plans revealed the depth of hurt and betrayal that accompanied the discovery that someone he had considered a trusted friend and ally had been systematically analyzing his vulnerabilities while maintaining the facade of partnership and mutual respect. The Kryptonian's moral philosophy emphasized transparency and trust as fundamental requirements for meaningful relationships, yet his own maintenance of his secret identity created contradictions that complicated his ability to condemn Batman's secretiveness entirely. Wonder Woman's warrior background provided her with frameworks for understanding the strategic thinking that had motivated Batman's preparations, while her diplomatic training helped her recognize the damage that such revelations could inflict on team morale and operational effectiveness. Her commitment to truth and justice required her to acknowledge the validity of both Batman's concerns and his teammates' sense of betrayal, while seeking solutions that could restore trust without compromising security. The Flash's scientific approach to the crisis emphasized the importance of analyzing the situation objectively while recognizing the emotional dimensions that made purely logical solutions inadequate for addressing the human relationships that had been damaged by Batman's choices. His commitment to forensic accuracy helped him understand Batman's motivations, while his moral clarity made him recognize the violations of trust that such preparations represented. Green Lantern's military experience provided him with perspectives on operational security and contingency planning that helped him appreciate the strategic value of Batman's preparations, while his core oath emphasized the importance of trust and mutual support that made such secretive planning problematic for effective teamwork. His willingness to confront difficult questions about individual versus collective responsibility helped facilitate discussions that might otherwise have been avoided. Aquaman's experience as ruler provided him with insights into the challenges of balancing individual friendships with broader responsibilities, while his telepathic abilities allowed him to perceive the emotional undercurrents that shaped his teammates' responses to the crisis. His understanding of leadership dynamics helped him recognize that the team's cohesion depended upon resolving these issues rather than simply moving past them without adequate discussion. The Martian Manhunter's telepathic powers made him uniquely aware of the psychological damage that the crisis had inflicted on team relationships, while his own experiences with loss and betrayal provided him with empathy for all parties involved in the conflict. His role as mediator and counselor became essential for facilitating the healing process that would be necessary for restoring operational effectiveness. The resolution of the Tower of Babel crisis required Batman's temporary departure from active participation in League operations, while trust could be rebuilt through demonstrated commitment to transparency and collective decision-making, rather than unilateral preparation for contingencies that affected all team members. His eventual return represented not merely forgiveness, but the development of new protocols and communication standards that would prevent similar violations of trust while maintaining appropriate levels of preparation for genuine emergency situations. The Obsidian Age storyline revealed the deep historical roots of conflict between order and chaos that extended far beyond contemporary heroic activities to encompass struggles that had shaped human civilization since its earliest development. The ancient sorcerers who had once threatened to plunge the world into magical darkness represented forces that had been temporarily defeated but never eliminated, requiring constant vigilance and occasional direct intervention to prevent their resurgence. The Justice League's displacement in time during their battle with these ancient enemies created opportunities for character development and relationship building that would not have been possible under normal operational circumstances, while also demonstrating the importance of legacy and inspiration in maintaining heroic traditions across generational changes. The temporary roster that replaced them during their absence proved that the principles and training methods they had developed could be successfully transmitted to new heroes who shared their commitment to justice and protection. The magical nature of the Obsidian Age conflicts required the League to expand their understanding of threats beyond scientific and technological categories to encompass supernatural forces that operated according to principles that challenged conventional approaches to problem solving and strategic planning. The integration of magical capabilities and perspectives into their operational framework enhanced their effectiveness while also creating new vulnerabilities and complications that required careful management. The relationship between magic and science that emerged from these conflicts revealed that both represented different approaches to understanding and manipulating fundamental forces rather than incompatible worldviews that could not coexist within the same operational framework. The heroes' ability to adapt their methods and expand their conceptual boundaries proved essential for addressing threats that transcended traditional categories while maintaining their core values and principles. The Infinite Crisis represented a return to multiversal scale threats that tested everything the League had learned about cooperation, sacrifice, and the defense of reality itself against forces that sought to impose alternative visions of existence through manipulation of fundamental constants and historical processes. Alexander Luther's reality-altering schemes demonstrated that intelligence and scientific capability could be directed toward destructive purposes that exceeded anything that conventional villainy could achieve through simple applications of superior power or tactical skill. The revelation that multiple Earths and alternate timelines continued to exist in modified forms following the original crisis created opportunities for cooperation and coordination between different versions of heroic archetypes, while also introducing new forms of confusion and conflict about identity, continuity, and the meaning of individual existence in a multiverse where multiple versions of the same person might pursue similar missions according to different moral frameworks or strategic approaches. The psychological impact of discovering that their reality was merely one of many possible configurations challenged the heroes' understanding of their own significance and the meaning of their choices, while forcing them to confront questions about destiny, free will, and the relationship between individual action and cosmic purpose that had profound implications for their continued effectiveness as protectors and guardians. Superman's encounter with alternate versions of himself revealed both the consistency of his core values across different realities and the variations in approach and emphasis that reflected different environmental and cultural influences on his development. His commitment to protecting innocent life and inspiring others toward their highest potential remained constant, while his methods and relationships reflected the unique circumstances that had shaped each timeline's version of his Burger story. Batman's discovery of alternate versions of his crusade against crime demonstrated that his fundamental dedication to justice and protection transcended the specific circumstances of his parents' death, while revealing how different choices and experiences might have led him toward alternative expressions of the same basic commitment to preventing others from experiencing the losses that had motivated his transformation into a symbol of hope and fear. Wonder Woman's interactions with alternate versions of her mission as ambassador and warrior revealed the universal nature of her commitment to truth and justice, while demonstrating how different cultural and historical contexts might require different approaches to achieving the same fundamental goals of promoting peace, understanding, and cooperation between diverse groups and civilizations. The resolution of the Infinite Crisis required unprecedented coordination between heroes from multiple realities, while demonstrating that the principles that had guided their individual development remained valid and effective when applied to challenges that exceeded anything that single timelines could address through isolated action. The victory that emerged proved that heroic values could transcend dimensional boundaries while providing frameworks for cooperation that enhanced rather than diminished individual effectiveness. The restoration of multiversal structure that followed Infinite Crisis created new opportunities for heroic intervention and cooperation, while also establishing precedents for managing relationships between alternate realities that could prevent future conflicts while enabling beneficial collaboration and resource sharing. The lessons learned during this crisis would prove invaluable for addressing subsequent multiversal threats while establishing the League's reputation as protectors whose capabilities and commitments extended beyond any single reality or timeline. The modern mythology that Morrison and others created around the Justice League during this era established them not merely as fictional characters or entertainment properties, but as contemporary expressions of archetypal forces and universal principles that had shaped human consciousness and moral development throughout recorded history. Their stories provided frameworks for understanding questions about power, responsibility, sacrifice, and service that remained relevant, regardless of changing social conditions or technological development. The influence of these mythological interpretations extended beyond comic book narratives to encompass broader cultural conversations about heroism, leadership, and the proper relationship between individual capability and collective responsibility in societies that faced increasingly complex challenges, requiring coordination and cooperation between diverse groups with competing interests and perspectives. The success of the Big Seven era in establishing the Justice League as modern mythology demonstrated that heroic narratives could evolve and adapt to address contemporary concerns while maintaining connection to fundamental human values and aspirations that transcended specific historical periods or cultural contexts. Their example provided inspiration and guidance for readers who faced their own challenges, requiring moral courage, strategic thinking, and commitment to principles that extended beyond personal advantage or immediate gratification. The legacy of this period in Justice League history would influence subsequent interpretations and adaptations of these characters, while establishing standards for heroic storytelling that emphasize psychological depth, moral complexity, and cosmic significance that elevated superhero narratives beyond simple adventure stories into explorations of fundamental questions about the nature and purpose of conscious existence in a universe filled with both wonder and terror. The dawn of the 21st century brought with it challenges that transcended every previous category of threat the Justice League had encountered, as cosmic forces that had slumbered since the universe's birth began to stir with malevolent purpose that encompassed not merely the conquest or destruction of individual worlds, but the fundamental corruption of existence itself. These were adversaries whose very nature challenged the basic assumptions upon which heroic intervention was predicated, entities whose power derived not from advanced technology or evolutionary development, but from their essential role as archetypal forces that shaped the relationship between order and chaos across all possible realities. The shadow of approaching catastrophe first manifested through subtle alterations in the quantum substrate that underlay physical reality, fluctuations so minute that only the most sensitive instruments could detect them, while their implications remained hidden from all but the most sophisticated theoretical physicists, whose mathematical models suggested conclusions that challenged the fundamental constants upon which scientific understanding was based. These were not random variations in natural law, but systematic modifications that followed patterns too complex and purposeful to represent anything other than deliberate manipulation by intelligences whose capabilities exceeded those of entire galactic civilizations. The Martian Manhunter's telepathic abilities made him among the first to detect the psychological disturbances that accompanied these reality alterations, as the collective unconscious of sentient beings throughout the galaxy began resonating with frequencies that spoke to primal fears and ancient traumas that predated individual memory or cultural development. His experiences as the sole survivor of his species provided him with unique insights into the nature of absolute loss and existential despair. Yet even his psychological resilience was tested by exposure to emanations that seemed designed to corrupt the very foundations of hope and meaning. Wonder Woman's connection to the divine realms revealed disturbances in the mythological structures that governed the relationship between mortal consciousness and transcendent forces, as gods and goddesses across multiple pantheons reported encounters with entities whose existence seemed to negate the possibility of heroism, sacrifice, and redemption that formed the basis of divine interaction with mortal affairs. Her training as both warrior and diplomat provided her with frameworks for understanding conflicts between cosmic principles. Yet this emerging threat operated according to rules that inverted every assumption about the proper relationship between power and responsibility. The first concrete manifestation of this ultimate evil emerged through the person of Darkseid, whose conquest of the anti-life equation during previous conflicts had been merely preparation for a campaign of psychological warfare that would make physical conquest unnecessary by eliminating the conceptual foundations upon which resistance was based. The equation itself represented more than mere mathematical formula, but rather a fundamental proof that individual existence was meaningless, that consciousness was a cosmic accident, and that the proper response to this revelation was absolute submission to superior authority that could relieve beings of the burden of choice and responsibility. Yet even Darkseid's mastery of anti-life proved insufficient for the ultimate victory he sought, as his implementation of the equation's power revealed that its corruption of consciousness operated through mechanisms that required willing participation from its victims, forcing him to develop increasingly sophisticated methods of psychological manipulation that could overcome the natural resistance that heroic principles provided against philosophical nihilism and existential despair. The corruption that began to spread through Earth's population manifested not as obvious mind control or supernatural possession, but as gradual erosion of hope, purpose, and faith in the possibility that individual actions could make meaningful differences in addressing the challenges that faced civilization. Citizens who had previously supported heroic intervention began questioning whether such efforts were ultimately futile attempts to postpone inevitable disasters rather than genuine solutions to systemic problems that exceeded human capability to address through conventional means. Superman found himself confronting not merely external enemies whose power challenged his physical capabilities, but internal doubts about the effectiveness and meaning of his mission that threatened to undermine the moral clarity that had guided his heroic career since its inception. The anti-life equation's influence operated by amplifying existing fears and uncertainties while providing logical frameworks that made despair and surrender seem like rational responses to overwhelming evidence of cosmic indifference to individual suffering and aspiration. The Kryptonian's scientific training helped him understand the mathematical elegance of the anti-life proof, while his moral convictions rejected its philosophical implications, creating internal conflicts that tested his psychological stability under pressures that exceeded anything he had previously experienced. His relationships with Lois Lane and other civilian connections became both sources of strength and vulnerabilities that could be exploited by enemies who understood that his dedication to protecting others made him susceptible to manipulation through threats to those he cherished most deeply. Batman's analytical mind proved both asset and liability when confronted with evidence that seemed to support anti-life's conclusions about the futility of individual effort and the inevitability of failure when finite beings attempted to address problems that exceeded their comprehension or capability. His extensive preparation and contingency planning had been predicated on the assumption that sufficient intelligence and resources could overcome any challenge. Yet the anti-life equation suggested that such efforts were merely elaborate forms of self-deception that postponed recognition of fundamental helplessness. The psychological warfare that Darkseid employed against the Dark Knight exploited his trauma and guilt about his parents' death, while demonstrating through careful logic that his crusade against crime was ultimately counterproductive, creating more sophisticated criminals while failing to address the systematic sources of violence and injustice that generated endless cycles of victimization and revenge. The equation's influence made these arguments seem not merely plausible, but obviously correct, forcing Batman to confront the possibility that his life's work had been an elaborate monument to his own psychological damage rather than genuine service to others. Wonder Woman's warrior training provided her with frameworks for understanding conflicts between cosmic principles, while her connection to divine truth offered some protection against the anti-life equation's logical structures. Yet, even she found herself questioning whether heroic intervention in mortal affairs was ultimately beneficial or merely interference that prevented beings from developing the strength and wisdom necessary for independent growth and development. The corruption that spread through Amazonian society reflected broader themes about the relationship between protection and empowerment, between preventing harm and fostering resilience, between serving others and enabling their dependency, that challenged fundamental assumptions about the proper role of superior beings in guiding and supporting those with lesser capabilities or fewer advantages. The Flash's connection to the Speed Force revealed its role as a fundamental constant that maintained stability across multiple realities, while demonstrating that even forces that transcended individual consciousness could be threatened by anti-life manipulation of the basic principles that governed existence across all possible dimensions. His scientific understanding helped him comprehend the theoretical foundations of the equation, while his moral clarity made him resist its philosophical implications. The revelation that the Speed Force itself could be corrupted by anti-life influence forced Barry Allen to confront questions about the nature of the power that enabled his heroic activities, while recognizing that even abilities that seemed inherently positive could be perverted toward destructive purposes when filtered through consciousness that had accepted nihilistic premises about the meaninglessness of existence and effort. Green Lantern's ring constructs began manifesting distortions that reflected his growing uncertainty about the value and effectiveness of willpower-based heroism, while his connection to the core provided access to reports from throughout the galaxy describing similar corruption of beings whose dedication to justice and protection had previously seemed absolute and unshakable. The systematic nature of this psychological assault suggested coordination by intelligence that understood the specific vulnerabilities of heroic consciousness. The Guardians of the Universe themselves began experiencing doubts about their billions of years of effort to maintain order and justice throughout their sectors of space, as anti-life influence made them question whether their interventions had actually improved conditions for the civilizations they protected, or merely created dependencies that prevented organic development of indigenous solutions to local problems and challenges. Aquaman's telepathic connection to marine life revealed widespread distress among ocean-dwelling creatures, as anti-life corruption spread through aquatic ecosystems while affecting the psychological balance that had maintained stability in undersea civilizations for thousands of years. His role as king required him to address not merely external threats, but internal doubts among his subjects about the value of maintaining their civilization against forces that seemed determined to prove its ultimate futility. The systematic nature of the corruption that affected both surface and oceanic populations suggested that anti-life's influence operated through mechanisms that transcended biological boundaries, while targeting the fundamental cognitive processes that enabled hope, purpose, and commitment to values that extended beyond immediate self-interest and survival. The Martian Manhunter's telepathic abilities made him uniquely vulnerable to anti-life influence, while also providing him with insights into the psychological mechanisms through which the corruption spread and the potential countermeasures that might prove effective against enemies whose weapons were logical arguments rather than physical force or technological superiority. His experience as the sole survivor of his species gave him profound understanding of loss and despair, while also demonstrating that such experiences could be transformed into sources of strength and compassion rather than justifications for surrender and nihilism. His connections with his adopted human family provided him with evidence that contradicted anti-life's fundamental premises about the meaninglessness of relationships and the futility of caring for others. The corruption of civilian populations created cascading effects that challenged every aspect of heroic intervention, while demonstrating how psychological warfare could achieve results that exceeded anything that conventional military assault could accomplish through applications of superior force or technological capability. Citizens who had previously supported heroic activities began viewing such efforts with suspicion and resentment, while expressing preferences for security and order over freedom and individual responsibility. The transformation of familiar faces into advocates for surrender and submission proved particularly devastating for heroes whose motivation had always been grounded in service to others and protection of values that transcended personal interest or advantage. The realization that their efforts to inspire and protect had apparently failed to create lasting change in the fundamental character of those they served forced each hero to confront questions about the effectiveness and meaning of their mission. Lois Lane's corruption represented perhaps the most personal and devastating blow to Superman's psychological stability, as the woman whose faith in his mission had sustained him through previous crises began advocating for acceptance of Darkseid's rule as the only rational response to evidence of humanity's incapacity for self-governance and moral development. Her arguments were presented with all the journalistic skill and logical reasoning that had made her an effective reporter and trusted advisor. The anti-life influence worked by taking genuine observations about human weakness and failure while amplifying them into universal principles that negated any possibility of growth, redemption, or positive change through individual or collective effort. The corrupted Lois presented compelling evidence of humanity's history of violence, environmental destruction, and systematic oppression, while arguing that such patterns proved the species was fundamentally flawed and incapable of improvement without external guidance and control. Commissioner Gordon's transformation from ally to advocate of authoritarian control demonstrated how anti-life corruption could pervert even the most dedicated public servants into supporters of systems that contradicted everything they had previously stood for, while providing them with logical frameworks that made such reversals seem like natural evolution rather than betrayal of fundamental principles. The corruption of law enforcement and government officials created systematic challenges that exceeded anything the heroes had previously faced, as the institutions and relationships that had supported their activities were transformed into obstacles that prevented effective intervention, while providing moral and legal justification for resistance to heroic activities that were redefined as dangerous vigilantism. Alfred Pennyworth's corruption proved particularly devastating for Batman, as his oldest friend and most trusted advisor began presenting carefully reasoned arguments about the futility of the Dark Knight's crusade, while providing evidence that suggested his activities had actually increased crime and violence in Gotham City. By creating escalating cycles of criminal innovation and law enforcement response, the psychological impact of hearing such arguments from someone whose judgment and loyalty had never been questioned forced Batman to confront the possibility that his entire mission had been based on self-deception, while recognizing that even his most trusted relationships could be corrupted by forces that understood how to exploit love and respect for destructive purposes. The apparent death of Batman during the climactic phases of the final crisis represented more than mere tactical setback, but rather symbolic demonstration of anti-life's capacity to eliminate even the most prepared and dedicated opponents through systematic corruption of everything they valued, and everyone they trusted. His sacrifice in attempting to prevent Darkseid's ultimate victory provided inspiration for resistance efforts, while also serving as evidence that individual heroism might be insufficient against enemies whose power operated on truly cosmic scales. Yet even as civilization appeared to collapse under the weight of anti-life corruption, and heroic resistance seemed increasingly futile against enemies whose influence penetrated every aspect of society and consciousness, signs began to emerge that suggested the fundamental premises upon which Darkseid's campaign was based contained logical contradictions and philosophical weaknesses that could be exploited by opponents who understood the true nature of the forces involved in this ultimate conflict between hope and despair. Superman's song at the end of all things represented the ultimate expression of heroic defiance against cosmic nihilism, demonstrating that even when faced with evidence of universal meaninglessness and the apparent futility of all effort, conscious beings could still choose to affirm values and relationships that transcended immediate circumstances while providing meaning that existed independent of external validation or cosmic approval. The miracle machine that emerged from this ultimate crisis represented more than mere technological solution, but rather symbolic demonstration that consciousness itself possessed creative capabilities that exceeded anything that anti-life philosophy could comprehend or predict, enabling the reconstruction of reality according to principles that affirmed, rather than negated, the significance of individual choice and moral commitment. The blackest night that followed revealed death itself as a force that could be corrupted and weaponized against life, while demonstrating that even the most fundamental natural processes could become enemies of consciousness and meaning, when manipulated by entities whose existence was predicated upon the elimination of hope and the systematic destruction of everything that made existence worthwhile rather than merely endurable. The Black Lantern Corps represented the ultimate perversion of heroic ideals, transforming fallen heroes and villains into weapons against everything they had once stood for, while demonstrating how even the most sacred memories and relationships could be corrupted into instruments of psychological warfare designed to break the will of those who continued to resist forces that sought the elimination of all independent thought and moral choice. The emotional spectrum that governed the various Lantern Corps revealed itself as a fundamental aspect of cosmic structure, while demonstrating that consciousness possessed inherent capabilities for resistance against nihilism through the cultivation and expression of feelings that affirmed rather than negated the value of existence and the possibility of positive change through individual and collective effort. The coalition of Lantern Corps that emerged to combat the Black Lantern threat demonstrated that cooperation between different approaches to heroic intervention could achieve results that exceeded anything that individual organizations could accomplish through isolated action, while proving that diversity of perspective and methodology enhanced rather than weakened overall effectiveness against enemies whose power seemed to exceed conventional understanding. Hal Jordan's role as leader of this unprecedented alliance tested his ability to coordinate between beings whose approaches to heroic intervention were based on fundamentally different emotional foundations, while maintaining focus on strategic objectives that required sacrifice and commitment. From participants whose motivations and methods often conflicted with traditional military protocols and hierarchical decision-making structures, the revelation that life itself possessed inherent capacities for resistance against death and meaninglessness provided philosophical foundations for continued heroic intervention, while demonstrating that consciousness was not merely accidental byproduct of physical processes, but rather fundamental aspect of cosmic structure that could influence the development of reality through expressions of will, and commitment that transcended individual mortality. The White Lantern power that emerged from the combination of all emotional spectrum energies represented the ultimate synthesis of heroic capabilities, while demonstrating that true strength derived not from single emotions or approaches, but from integration of diverse perspectives and methodologies into coherent frameworks that could address challenges requiring both analytical thinking and emotional commitment. The flashpoint that followed demonstrated how even well-intentioned attempts to correct past tragedies could generate unintended consequences that threatened to destabilize the entire structure of reality, while proving that acceptance of loss and limitation was essential for maintaining the stability that enabled growth and development, rather than merely preventing change through futile attempts to preserve ideal circumstances. Barry Allen's decision to attempt saving his mother revealed the depth of his human connections, while demonstrating how personal grief could override the strategic thinking and moral clarity that normally guided heroic decision-making, creating opportunities for cosmic forces to exploit emotional vulnerabilities in ways that threatened consequences extending far beyond individual satisfaction or family relationships. The alternate timeline that resulted from this temporal intervention revealed how different choices and circumstances could generate entirely different approaches to heroic intervention, while demonstrating that fundamental values and principles remained constant across variations in historical development and individual experience that might otherwise seem to suggest complete relativism in moral judgment. The darker tone and more violent methods that characterized heroes in the Flashpoint timeline reflected the influence of different historical pressures and cultural circumstances, while revealing that heroic ideals required constant cultivation and reinforcement through positive examples and social support systems that might be absent in realities where different evolutionary pressures had shaped the development of civilization. The merging of multiple timeline elements into the New 52 reality represented both loss and renewal, eliminating certain relationships and historical developments, while creating opportunities for fresh approaches to familiar challenges that had become overly complicated through decades of accumulated continuity and interconnected storylines that sometimes obscured rather than illuminated fundamental themes. The rebirth that eventually emerged from these reality reconstructions demonstrated the resilience of heroic principles, while proving that essential values and relationships possessed inherent strength that could survive even systematic attempts to eliminate or modify them through cosmic-level intervention in the structure of reality itself. The restoration of hope and legacy that characterized the rebirth era reflected recognition that heroic narratives required both innovation and continuity, fresh perspectives and established traditions, individual expression, and collective commitment to principles that transcended personal preference or contemporary fashion in approaches to storytelling and character development. The integration of new members into classic roster configurations demonstrated that expansion of diversity and perspective could enhance rather than diminish the effectiveness of heroic cooperation, while proving that fundamental principles possessed universal relevance that could be expressed through different cultural backgrounds and personal experiences without losing their essential meaning or practical effectiveness. The endless cycle of threat and protection that defined the League's ongoing mission reflected the recognition that heroic intervention was not temporary solution to problems that could be permanently resolved through sufficient application of power and intelligence, but rather ongoing commitment to values and principles that required constant defense against forces that sought their corruption or elimination. The League's role as eternal guardians of possibility itself represented the ultimate evolution of their mission from planetary defenders into cosmic protectors, whose responsibilities encompassed not merely specific populations or geographic territories, but the fundamental structures that enabled consciousness, growth, and positive change throughout all possible realities and timeline configurations. Their success in maintaining hope and inspiration across generations of changing membership and evolving challenges demonstrated that heroic principles possessed inherent vitality that could adapt to new circumstances while preserving essential characteristics that made them valuable guides for beings seeking to use extraordinary capabilities in service of purposes larger than personal advantage or immediate gratification. And so concludes our journey through the endless chronicles of Earth's mightiest protectors, those titans who stand eternal watch over the innocent and hopeful. From their first uncertain alliance against alien invasion to their cosmic battles that reshaped the very nature of reality itself, we have witnessed how individual heroes became something greater than the sum of their parts. In their unity, they found strength beyond measure. In their diversity, wisdom beyond any single perspective. In their hope, power beyond any weapon or technology. The Justice League endures not because they are perfect, but because they represent the best aspirations of conscious beings everywhere. The desire to protect rather than exploit, to build rather than destroy, to inspire rather than intimidate. Their headquarters may move from cave to satellite to Watchtower. Their roster may change with each generation, but their core mission remains constant: to stand as guardians against the darkness and as beacons of hope for all who dream of better tomorrows. Let their example guide your rest, keeper of dreams, and know that as long as there are those willing to stand for justice, the League's watch continues eternal, and hope itself remains unvanquished. Sleep now in the knowledge that heroes watch over the night, and that somewhere among the stars, champions gather still to face whatever challenges tomorrow may bring, to test the resolve of those who choose service over dominion, sacrifice over safety, and love over fear.